It's been a hot minute.
It's been too long. It's been enough time that we can at least say that it's been a bit, but I wouldn't say it's been too long.
Yeah, I regularly listen to podcasts that update far less frequently than we will.
Exactly.
Regardless of circumstances, we're going to be fine. We didn't make any promises. The first episode's a pilot, and that doesn't guarantee anything.
There's a lot to get through for this fucking show, so it's like one week of in between watching is not going to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Gives us the time to fully digest exactly what we're seeing.
And boy, howdy, are we digesting. There's...
I guess before we fully get into actually talking about the episodes,
Yes.
we should say, like, we watched mainly only the first 6 currently.
Yes.
Just because that's digestible, not to completely wear ourselves out immediately.
That's what our schedule could allow.
Well, yeah. It's, again, we don't have a set schedule or anything, but also it's just like, you also don't want to shotgun an entire season of a show in like a week, because then you're going to start hating the show real fast.
Oh yeah, big time. Also, there's so much going on in these first 6 episodes that I don't think we'd have a good picture painted for us of the show if we shotgunned it all in. It would just go by too fast.
And it's really surprising to me because there's a lot of stuff that's really, I wouldn't say like famous from the show, but a lot of stuff that's really like synonymous with pop culture now that's in the first 6 episodes. Like, even just watching the first episode itself, within the first 5 minutes, you get the fucking "it's all toilet sounds" meme, and it's like,
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, half of the best moments that have ever been in a YouTube poop come from the first 6 episodes.
Exact, or like the fucking "I'm about to bust" meme. It's like that's like in like the 3rd or 4th episode, I think. And it's like, how is it that so much of this show that become meme lexicon was so early into the series? How did they get it right so fast?
Anyone who was digging for gold to use in memes did not have to dig very deep. It's there.
No,
it's all there.
It's so surprising how quickly some of this stuff just sticks. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, that works. Keep doing that. Don't stop.
And you know what? Speaking of what works and what doesn't, the first, like, 3 episodes, I'll admit, got me a little bit scared. Because, especially for the pilot and episode 2, excuse me, there were some cutaway gags that felt surprisingly tame for the rest of the show. And it doesn't seem like they make a standard of doing that going forward.
Yeah, I took note of that too. Like, I thought it was really strange early on. They do like, this is kind of just a general notice, but they do like weird like memory cutaways.
Yeah.
Really like for like the first 2 or 3 episodes where they're like flashback to, it's usually Bobby or
you remember how my dad raised me?
Exactly. It's usually like Hank or Peggy like being like, you remember how this happened to me in my childhood, and it's like that's it has that weird sort of Family Guy-esque setup for a punchline that does work. Each of the jokes were pretty funny.
Yeah.
But it's also like I don't expect that sort of joke setup from King of the Hill.
Yeah, it's not the King of the Hill style that we remember, how many seasons down?
Oh god, who knows?
Having been alive through the entire length, if not even absorbing it very much, it's not a show that anyone talks about the cutaway gags for like we do with Family Guy. And having seen them so early on, I definitely had a bit of worry, but it doesn't seem like they carried on with that.
So what?
First impression, just getting off the bat, a lot funnier than I remembered it being. Like, genuinely a lot funnier than I perceived the show to be early on.
It comes out swinging so hard with the pilot, and it doesn't stop.
Because that was the thing, is I was watching the pilot, and like the first bit of it is like, oh, it's the 4 guys just hanging out of the truck. I was like, this is what I remember of the show, of it being very low key, not like trying to be super funny at all times. But then it's like, no, the show is pretty consistently funny throughout the episodes we saw.
One of the first lines we get is Boomhauer doing his whole spiel and Hank turning around saying, "Well, my truck needs his leadership." And that set the tone for the entire thing. So rarely does a pilot get it so right. And I distinctly remember last time we recorded, I said outright, like, I'm expecting my expectations and my memories to be shattered immediately.
I agree.
everything that I said was like variable, or I wasn't sure if they were going to keep it up. They set it up in episode 1. All the little long-term running jokes are all there.
Just a show about nothing.
The first episode specifically, I guess we should start talking a little bit more about the specific episodes. The first episode specifically it was funny. There was a lot of funny stuff, but it felt really, how do I put this? Not low stakes, but very domestic, I guess you could say. Like,
I don't know if I'd put it on a pedestal that was as good as the other episodes, because no pilot ever really is, but it's a very strong, like, solo episode of a show.
It's very good about portraying the characters and most of their traits effectively, but I think the weird part about it is the story around those characters that is so strange, in an almost, it puts you off guard because it's such an interesting and kind of confusing topic for a pilot of all things.
A little bit, but I think it was done well to paint a picture of the town, not as much the Hill family themselves, but how everyone sees them.
Yeah, and I think that was also one of the things that caught me off guard initially when I was watching it was they make it seem like the Hills are like not reviled, but they're like almost well known for being weird. And
Yes.
I've never really gotten that sort of feeling from the show like later on. So I wonder if that was just sort of like a sort of plot point that was brought up for the pilot, but then never sort of really brought up again. I don't know. I never really got the vibe that was the intentional story that they were going to go for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I'm not too sure myself, but there was a feeling I got from episode 6, actually, that kind of ropes into that a little bit. And I may be going ahead of myself a little bit, but it's relevant. It's fine. Where we find out that Peggy is herself kind of a habitual gossip, and it seems like that is
True.
A very long-standing pastime in the city of Arlen. Town of Arlen.
Town, city, whatever.
Yeah. In Arlen, there's a very strong gossiping community among the housewives and the spinsters there.
That's fair. I didn't really connect those. You're right. I didn't really make that connection immediately. I guess I was too busy with the other pressing matter of that episode to think about it too deeply.
Yeah. Well, the matter of that episode sits in the stomach a little heavier than most. So.
But but you're right, because I remember them cutting really quickly to that sort of gossiping angle of like all these characters talking about Hank and what he was doing. It's like that was such a I would expect that sort of hook from something like The Simpsons or again, I don't want to bring up Family Guy, but those kind of shows where the absurdity and like strangeness of our main protagonist is what drives the show. Whereas for as eccentric as like Hank and Peggy are, I wouldn't call them like
they're not outsiders.
No, exactly. I wouldn't say they're any different than like the rest of the city. I would say they come into contact, like they clash with their personalities, but I wouldn't say they're out of place in their own city. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? Now that I think about it, in episode 2, there's also another indication showing how other people see the Hill family, particularly Peggy in this instance.
Well, yeah.
In a way that kind of plays into this. I think there are... I think in this kind of very conservative suburb town of Texas, especially at the time, which I'll make a note on that later. But like... in this time, certain activities are very visibly
frowned upon.
Yeah, there's a certain standard that's held that the Hills may not always vibe with.
Right.
And they're normal people. They're normal American people. But everyone is a little bit too quick to jump on each other's peculiarities unless they're friends.
That was honestly, I was realizing in the first episode, they made Hank like real abrasive in this episode, and I understand it was for like plot reason, but man, do they play up his anger in the first episode?
Yeah,
like,
he never
holy
really gets
shit.
that bad again.
He has moments when he gets pushed, like later on in the series, I know, but like this is an episode of like he is just so mad about everything, and it's really hard to watch in some spots. But it's like I understand it's for the purpose of the plot.
Yes,
but it feels like they are playing up certain aspects of all the characters just to really try and nail home who they are, but I don't think it's fair, I guess you could say.
When compared to the rest of the show, it feels, or the rest of the show that we've seen so far, it feels
Right.
out of place. I am of the opinion that if you want to sell a show in a pilot, you generally have to put them into a scenario where you get a whole lot of information across very quickly. And I
Yeah.
think that is portrayed in the context of them having a particularly bad day rather than like, this is what they are. They never say that explicitly, but that's how it kind of runs in my mind of this is what a real bad day to Hank looks like, right?
I guess we should clarify for anyone that hasn't seen the episodes. We should like give a quick like description of what it's even about.
Oh yeah.
And I think King of the Hill has one of the strongest plots for an opening of like a series like this before. Where
Yes.
The plot is child abuse in some ways, and it's like, man, that is a strong topic to open up your adult comedy cartoon with.
So
It's yeah.
it's wild. So the first episode, for those that don't know or haven't seen, the pilot opens with the four alley boys, good old Hank, Dale, Bill, and Boomhauer,
And Greg.
hanging out on the truck. And it gradually devolves into a situation in which the Hill family get investigated for child abuse by CFS or CPS. Right.
It's like you say that plot out loud just really quickly, and it sounds absurd still. It's like,
I realize
how is
I
that-
left out a couple details in the middle, but we're going to cover those in a sec.
right, but it's still just like the through line of this is how it starts, and then it becomes a CPS episode is like,
Yes.
so crazy.
And I think it also paints an interesting picture of describing the perspective of the failing bureaucratic government in the area, given the circumstances that lead to this situation. But due to a series of misfortunes, the Hill family is investigated by CPS for Bobby's safety. Bobby, being a child and also dealing with very conservative parents, takes advantage of this situation to milk the attention and sort of viewed safety from his father to its limits.
He starts purposely doing things that would piss off Hank, but also does it in the effort of trying to get him to be nice to Bobby, which is, again, when you say it out loud, it sounds really fucking sad.
Yes. But I for all the things that I can say about the pilot, two things come to mind. One being that it sets up every single long-term joke that I'm aware of very quickly.
I think the only thing that doesn't really set up, does it set up John Redcorn?
Sure does.
I don't think that does. Is he in it? I couldn't remember.
When
you're
CPS
right.
officer
You're right.
comes to talk to Dale.
No, you're right. That's right.
Yeah, and she runs off. It's been 12 years with that migraine, doctor. What's your face? When are you? And you still get headaches every night. Healing takes time, honey. And then she jumps in the car and drives off.
No, that's right. I completely forgot. You're right. No, they set up pretty much everything, huh? Jesus Christ.
It covers Cotton Hill. It covers John Redcorn. It covers the narrow urethra.
That one was surprising. I thought that was a later, like at least a season later type. Like,
yeah, I would have expected maybe be in episode 6. No, every single thing is in episode 1.
I didn't think they would swing that heavy, like with all the gags. Jesus Christ. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
So they covered every single episode, or they covered every joke. What was the other thing?
You were going through the through line of the episode still, and I interrupted you. We were talking about how Bobby was doing things to purposely piss off Hank, and it was kind of sad. And
it's a really good indicator of the relationship between specifically Bobby and Hank, because that becomes the core for the entire series from here on out. With rare exception where they cover other characters, but for the most part, it's a necessary view into the relationship between Hank and Bobby, which is strained, but one of tremendous pride, even in his most disappointing moments.
I think that was what really kind of caught me off guard watching the episodes I watched them back to back pretty much while taking notes. Each one kind of showcases really not problematic parts of the relationships of the Hill family. Like, they have problems, but more so, it showcases like the strains between their ideas and their different personalities, but also it really comes together in the end with pretty wholesome endings, like in every single one of them. And it's like usually in shows like that, it's like, oh, the show goes back to the status quo and nothing really matters. But in this one, it's like there's definite growth, and like you learn a lot about how these characters feel about each other pretty easily throughout the episode, and the ending really ties it all together in really wholesome ways.
There's a certain feeling of other shows where returning to the status quo at the end of the episode really just means that consequences have been avoided. Where
Right.
in King of the Hill, when we do have these family lessons, it feels like it ends on a point where things may not have changed, but they weren't really going to. What we realized is that everyone is happier being where they're at. They're not avoiding confrontation or conflict. They just realize that they all kind of need each other or want each other to be there. And then the episode ends with all of them being happier for it than not.
Right.
It's not like an avoidance of considering change. It really is just a reassurance that everyone's there for a reason. And it's because they love each other. For better
It's like
or worse.
I wrote down in my notes near the end of the first episode, I was like, oh, this is a really wholesome ending to this like story of supposed child abuse and stuff like that. And then I had to cut off my note midway because it was in the scene where Peggy was revealing that, oh, Bobby was lying the whole time just because he wanted attention. And
I'll kill him.
Yes, I was like, do you remember what Hank says immediately after that? It's just, I was like, oh my god, that is one hell of a joke to go off on.
Now calm down, Hank.
Yeah, but it's still even though it does that funny line of, oh, I'll kill him, it's like it still ties together in the end of like the episode just ties together with Hank and Bobby on the porch talking to each other and them revealing like, hey, you may get on my nerves and we may butt heads, I still fucking love you
Unconditionally.
And that's like that's all the whole episode was trying to tie together with. And it's like it's written so well that you can go through this entire episode of jokes and goofs and all these characters kind of being dickheads to each other, but in the end it still comes together of, you know what, these characters actually give a shit about each other.
Yeah. This is also where we get the confirmation from Luann, who will not be returning home. Which puts her mother in jail. This sets up a few things later on, but she's already there at the start, waiting on, I think, a trial for her mother or something like that.
She's there because was she already on a trial, or was it that she was
her parents
her
had to
mom-
fight. Something was going on, so she was staying with the Hill House. I learned that it's Peggy's brother is the relation.
Yes.
Luann just takes after her mother more. But by the end of it, Luann comes to Hank crying that they're gonna put Mama away. I don't know what to do. I can't go through cosmetology school.
I think she specifically says they got in such a fight that it tipped over the entire trailer. And I was like,
she set aside some beer. Her father drank it instead. Her mother got so mad they got in a fight where the whole thing tipped over upside down, and the cops got called and took them both away.
That's such a funny. It's such a quick line, but it paints such an amazing picture that it doesn't need to dwell on it at all.
It does.
It's
100%
so good.
Does. And it also culminates in the quick little notice in the middle of the CPS altercation where he tries to pass off Luann on CPS.
I wrote that down too. Just the line of where was it? It was, let's give him Luann.
Let's give him Luann. I got another one back here. You could take her.
God, that first episode it's again surprisingly funnier than I expected. Just in general, I did not expect that many jokes.
It's not gag jokes. It's character humor in a lot of ways that I was worried I wasn't going to get when I started seeing flashbacks, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's a really good setup for the show. It's not as good as the other episodes, but it's good.
I think it's one of the better ones of the batch we watched. I would say it's at least in the middle. personally for me, I think it's in the middle of all the episodes we watch. It's not the worst, but it's not the best either.
I think it is my second to lowest.
That's fair. I don't. If anyone said that this was like their least favorite of the first season, I don't think I would blame them necessarily. Yeah. It's definitely not as good as everything else that comes after. Again, that what we've watched. I wouldn't say it's the best, but I think it still does enough that I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't mind watching that again if it just came on TV or something.
In fact, I did. It might be second to lowest on my list, but I still watched all of them again because it's a good episode.
Yeah. I think there's only one episode in this batch that I'm like, I don't think I want to watch that one again. we'll get to that.
We'll get to that one because I have one that I also kind of feel the same way about.
I'm curious if it's the same one.
We'll find out. Episode 1, hilarious. I'm so glad that it sets everything up. It feels like it moves faster than I want a King of the Hill episode to be, and honestly, I'm glad that doesn't persist. Honestly,
yeah, I agree that it felt like a lot of stuff was moving really quickly, like they were trying to get the whole story in without letting things breathe. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I think that's just the growing pains of a pilot compared to like when you fully get like a series greenlit and you know what you're doing.
I find it endlessly entertaining that there is not a single frame in the show that shows that Lady Bird exists until Hank starts chasing the CPS guy off, and she darts into frame, and she is not there again until Bobby's pulling his pranks. She exists in this external dog space that has no place in the house.
Lady Bird is ethereal, and she is allowed to because she's a queen.
Yeah, exactly. You've heard of Hammer Space. Now get ready for Dog Space. There is a dog door next to the back door, and I don't think I saw like a dog food bowl in the kitchen. I don't know where Lady Bird eats.
We don't question these things. We don't want to know because she hasn't told us, and you are not privileged to know what Lady Bird does in her own time.
Lady Bird is a mythological creature that comes only when needed. Lady Bird might be a wizard.
She's kind of a cryptid, I think. She comes and goes, she does what she wants, and then she leaves.
I'm so glad that we talked so much about Lady Bird in the previous podcast episode because I'm keeping my eye out for her because I barely remembered that she existed.
I genuinely think we placed her pretty well on our little like chart of characters because she's definitely more cartoonish than I remembered, but still grounded.
Yeah. She's got the old dog energy of just putting up with things that happen to her because she doesn't care that much anymore. It's like, oh, Bobby and Joseph are just gonna, dress her up and take pictures of her while she's on the riding lawnmower. Why does she put up with this? Well, she doesn't really care that much. She's old.
Why does she put up with it? Well, she's a dog.
She's a dog. She doesn't care. And it pisses Hank off to no end, although I think that's mostly just because they're fussing with his mower more than his dog.
Oh, yeah. So should we, do we want to keep talking about episode 1, or do we want to move on? Because I feel like we've gone over a lot, and I think if we keep going, we're just going to keep retreading ground.
I didn't take notes. Do you have any other notes that you want to bring up?
I mean, most of my notes are just kind of like quick jokes that caught me off guard or things that I wanted to remember, like to talk about. But I think we've covered most of them. The other two things I wrote down that were specific jokes were Hank saying "Don't play lawyer ball" when he said he was going to get walked.
Don't play lawyer ball with me, boy.
It's like Bobby's like, well, what if he just walks me? He's like, don't play lawyer ball. It's like, all right. And the other one was there's two actually.
Yeah.
One of them was Hank calling Dale a giblet head.
I did miss that one. That's very good.
And the other one was because there's like 2/3 of the way in, Hank's having trouble with his car.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how to fix it still. And Dale tries to fix it while Hank goes inside.
Oh yeah.
And he snips his brake wire.
Yep.
And when he does that, Dale starts walking off in this weird.
Starts rolling.
It rolls backwards into the garage, and as Dale is leaving, he starts trying to like weasel his way out. And the line he says is, "I've got some edging to do."
Yes.
And I'm like, I was so tempted to look up what that meant in the 90s, because my brain has been tainted into a completely different perception of what that word means. Both of them probably still fit Dale, though.
Both of them probably do. In this perspective, I think he's talking about his lawn.
I believe so.
I I want to point out a couple things. One, as he's cut the brake cable, Bill notices and mentions so. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Dale, I think you broke the brake cable, Dale. And all you hear as he's rolling backwards is, no, I didn't.
One more thing I want to one more thing I want to say. Bill is surprisingly constrained in these first couple episodes because I'm so used to the Bill that comes later in the series that I know about that he still has moments where he's like sad and kind of pathetic, but he seems more put together here.
That comes up in episode 2 and 3 in ways that I want to talk about in more detail. But in episode 1, he's measured. He's a regular guy, though I did notice that it's weird how he and Hank wear almost the same clothes. I've always noticed that. Yeah. I think that was intentional. I really do. Yeah, he might have a weird fixation on Hank. Regardless, I want to also mention that despite Hank's best efforts during the ball game, Bobby does manage to get to first base without swinging his bat. I don't know if you noticed that. I did notice that. Yeah, I did. I did. all that trouble, and it's just an accidental bunt that gets him moving. I mean, hey, look, it works. It works. And Bobby was right. Bobby was able to get going without swinging the bat, proving his dad wrong accidentally. Sometimes Bobby is a bit of a genius, and we just don't recognize it. Yeah, he is. Do you have any other notes? I think I'm good on... Well, you got one? Just remembering one of the first lines. When they're talking about Ford versus Fiat. Oh, yeah. Dale's an idiot. That's literally the first note I have in my page. It just says Fiat joke. I hope that the second one includes Hank dating the episode so bad by talking about George W. Bush going over to Japan and vomiting on their automotive administrator. No, I should have, but I did catch that. I absolutely did catch that. I remember that from when I was young, and I am so glad that they commented on it. God. Also, it's weird to hear them talk about Seinfeld. Again, dating the episode, that was a weird one. That absolutely was a weird one. It was a very... It was a very unique way to introduce King of the Hill, because it's the last words spoken before the theme song. Yeah. Only to go into what is probably the fastest episode that we've seen so far. Like, dangle show about nothing, man. The theme song runs, and in my mind, I'm thinking, like, as someone who likes to think of themselves as a writer, of like, oh, this is a great way to illustrate that this is also a show about nothing. And no, it's true. It goes into a really weird, like, roller coaster of stakes. Yeah, the whole show has just moments of really mundane storytelling mixed with the strangest of stakes popping up here and there. Like, things that should not be as dire as they are becoming, like, city-wide problems. Hey, I need both of you to sign this permission slip. Speaking of which, episode 2, you don't know who I am, but I know where you live. I was very surprised they brought that joke back like twice, and it was great each time. They brought it back a third time in the after credits. Yeah. The one thing I do want to say about this episode before we get started, I think it's such a funny sort of topic to even bring up in a second episode like this. Yes. Because it is a relatable topic that, like, any parent probably has to go through. Oh yeah. But at the same time, the way they frame it is so astronomically funny that I couldn't help but write down I thought the setup was brilliant. Because I guess, quick note, the whole episode is about, like, sexual education at school and, like, when and where you should teach kids about it. Yes. But I think the funniest thing is, I'm sure you caught it. You usually catch the same things I do. How both Hank and Peggy are talking about how they want to be the ones to teach Bobby at home. It's not the job of the school. And then both of them just sit there in silence for a few seconds and go, let's kind of like look at each other and be like, well, neither of them want to be the one to do it. So it's like, I thought that was taught in the home. you're absolutely right. And then they just stare at each other.
Yep. It is a perfect setup of the entire episode of just everyone's kind of a fucking hypocrite and a bunch of assholes.
Well, you're substitute teacher of the year 1996, if I'm correct. Well, I'm also a decent woman. I got a bad back, Peggy. And then she just sighs and gets up.
she just gets up. It's such a funny episode. I think the moment I realized that the show was a lot funnier than I gave it credit for was the deadpan delivery of Bobby talking to Peggy saying, "I'm a little worried about being a slut."
Yes! It's the best line. I think it is either my favorite or my second favorite line out of all of these 6 episodes. It is so good.
It is so deadpan and just direct.
I'm a little worried about being a slut.
Peggy barely reacts to it and then just moves on. It's so fucking good.
And it's immediately followed by the dynamite moment of her dancing around trying to explain like the differences between male and female anatomy, and him just going, "Yeah, like a penis," and she just silently gets up and walks out the door. Goes to tell Hank, "I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it."
Only to immediately be like back to back gagged with every one of the adult friends from the alley looking at Hank like, "You didn't send your woman in to do a man's job, did you, Hank?" Then him going like, It's so good.
I'll give him credit where credit is due. While the characters, like the side characters like Dale and them, aren't necessarily the focus yet, they still feel like, even though they butt heads, they're still friends. And that feels good because like they'll give each other shit, but you know they're just being funny and they're just being like friends about it. They're not trying to be like malicious.
It's like something we talked about in the first recording session, right? Like you don't get to pick who your neighbors are, but you get to pick if you're friends with them or not. And they exemplify this so well. They're also radically different people with different priorities, and they still come by to hang out together and try to fix Hank's truck for the 17th time in a row. Also, I think this is the episode that ends with a very important moment, a really subtle but very important moment between Hank and Luann. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah. I think the whole episode is it's really smart about the way that it portrays the topic it's trying to bring up, because I understand it's really sensitive for a lot of people, but it really shouldn't be, because it's just your fucking body and it's everything that everyone's going to have to deal with in one way or another.
The way you just described that is the crux of the whole episode.
And that's, exactly. That's the thing. Is like there's no problem that should be brought up about it, but everyone keeps literally everyone keeps making it a big deal. And that's that's that sort of thing I was talking about, where like it's a mundane story that's brought to like a citywide problem because everyone is just a fucking asshole in Arlen.
With the funniest climax moment in the final few minutes.
Yes.
Which, you know what, we should probably go over the overview. Season 2, this one actually had, or not Season 2, Episode 2. This one actually has a name. It's called Square Peg.
Does the first one not have a name, or is it just
Pilot?
Called Pilot? Fair enough.
It's listed everywhere I can find as just the King of the Hill Pilot. So, even if you ignore the pilot, this is also a killer first episode of a show.
Oh, yeah.
It's paced better than the first one for sure, because I guess there's some comfort to knowing that you've been licensed to continue. But
because at that point you're like, okay, we have multiple episodes where we can just write an episode. We don't have to worry about like trying to impress people to get funding.
Yeah. So the crux of the episode is Bobby comes home with a permission slip for sex ed, but he's like 11, and everyone thinks that's a little early. The parents refuse, speaking to the point that, that should be taught in the home by his family, but neither of them are willing to go through with it. Peggy gets sent in, fails to teach him anything because she's too embarrassed. Hank is also too embarrassed and unable to speak to it.
He tries. He definitely tries, but we'll get to that.
but he fails, and so they decide to like try and put together the permission slip after ripping it up, saying like, yeah, maybe we can leave a teacher to do this, right? But everyone in the town is both
super against it.
disappointed that they won't teach their kid this, but also hates that sex ed is being brought to Arlen. At least before high school, right?
Yeah. Like pretty much like almost all the characters that we know of that have like kids have in some way bring up like, oh well, I'm not gonna let my kid do it. No way, that's not decent. We don't want our kids to learn that.
That should be taught in the home.
Exactly. Even Dale is like super against it.
Yeah, he's got the worst sex life out of any of them.
Sure does.
And you know, all of this culminates in them deciding in the last minute, like, hey, maybe we can't do this. Maybe we'll just leave it to a teacher. Only to find out that the teacher that was going to be used for that was going to be teaching sex ed got run off by a quote-unquote right-wing maniac that threatened them. Smash cut to Dale fucking saying, I got ways to handle this, Hank. Don't you worry. And guess who is picking up the slack other than substitute teacher of the year 1996, Peggy Hill.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way to sort of bring the topic and problem back to the Hills, because it both highlights how not necessarily, I was gonna say narcissistic, how narcissistic Peggy is. That's not what I mean to say. Yeah. How proud she is to like to put that sort of thing on herself after it was given to her, and then like try to own it, because
she's definitely doing it a little bit out of spite, because she seems aware that nobody thinks she can. Yeah. And I think she's a little disappointed that she couldn't in the first place.
Yeah. I agree.
But she is very, very eager to prove herself, and that is a very... I liked that a lot in this episode, I'm going to be honest. I really liked Peggy in this episode.
I did too, and that's one of those things I was kind of glad to see of, like... I know of some later episodes where Peggy is just insufferable as a character.
Yes.
But she still has her quirks here without being too overbearing, and I think that works. I think that works, especially for the episode where it's like, you know, we see a lot more of her character and what she's willing to go for both her pride, but also like her family.
Yeah,
like
she starts off very well aware of the importance of sex ed, and it's proven several times throughout the show that she wishes she had gotten better as a child. She struggles with the typical conservative shame of being able to like speak it, but she wants Bobby to come out of this healthier and, you know, smarter for it.
Right.
So when a second chance falls into her lap, awkwardly as it is, she takes it and she puts her all into it in a way that is, until the second to last moment, very, very good to watch.
I think it's really nice that the episode really has like a cyclical ending that calls back to like the very start of the episode.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, my observation of all these episodes just have a really nice, wholesome ending, despite how crazy they can be throughout the episode. And I'm happy to see that.
Oh yeah. We get
I will say though.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was just gonna segue into something else. Go ahead.
No, I also was. Go ahead.
Well, so mainly the jokes in this one definitely felt like they were more pointed, in that the jokes in the first episode a lot of times felt circumstantial, like, oh, they were just jokes in relation to what was going on at the moment in the scene.
Yes.
Whereas there's a lot of setup and punchline in this episode, which I think works in a lot of instances, but it's also just weird having, like, do you remember when they do another one of those flashback gags with Peggy, and she talks about how her mother tried to give her sex ed when she was young too?
With the flower book.
And like, okay, that's a funny enough joke in and of itself. Do you remember what she says immediately afterwards? When the flashback ends? About how when the first time she kissed someone?
Yes.
She's like, oh, I haven't, the first time I kissed someone was when I was 20. And then there's like a brief pause.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes, of course he's dead now.
Like that to be an obvious return.
And I had to pause. I paused the episode and I rewound it and watched that whole scene. I don't know what the fuck she meant by that. What do you mean? Of course he. What?
I don't know. Maybe it's a personal pride thing about like. So it's very much like a thing, especially sex-wise in communities like this, to preserve purity. And I think it might be in the same way that Bobby's afraid of being a slut.
Right.
Like she might have a bit of lingering shame of like kissing someone that wasn't the right one for her, and kind of just sweeps that under the rug by saying, well, he died, so I guess I don't have to think about him.
I guess that's a good way to interpret it, because I was sitting there, I wrote it down, all my notes say about it is, course he's dead now, what the fuck was the implication here? And I just, it was the first moment where I was like, okay, that feels like they were attempting to just really make a joke for the sake of making a joke. But I guess with the implication, because she wants to be a decent woman, that makes more sense.
Yeah, she wants to be a decent woman. This is entirely like projection, maybe. Assumption. I imagine it is her displaying some sort of like semi-prudish desire to be a decent woman by saying like, "Oh, you don't have to worry about my first kiss. He's dead." But like, that's such a non-issue for anyone who's normal at all.
It's so blunt and sudden that I couldn't help but like have to take a second and step back and be like, okay, hang on a minute, what does she mean by this?
I think that's what they were aiming for, but it could have also just been a one-off joke.
But I think it's really indicative that the show is a lot funnier than I gave it credit for, because this episode has a lot of just really quick gags that they don't linger on for too long. They'll say something or do something and then just move to the next scene without putting too much attention on it.
I think one of the most killer moments of that was Peggy studying the sex ed book and Luann saying like, "Oh, that book must be old because there's more steps of arousal now."
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like, back to back, Peggy just saying, "Oh, how can you say that without, feeling ashamed? What's it like to live without an ounce of shame? Does it feel good?" And Luann just comes back at me like, "Yeah, it does." And then the scene ends.
And then the scene just moves on. The other one I was thinking of was the dairy scene. I don't know if you remember that. I'm sure you do.
Oh, God, yeah, the dairy farm.
So when Hank takes his turn to try and teach Bobby about sex ed,
the ways of life.
He remembers a flashback of when his dad taught him, quote unquote, and he
on the dairy farm with the bull and the cow.
Yeah, he made Hank watch a bull and a cow make it a little foal. He takes him to a dairy farm, not even to see like the actual act,
just a ranch,
of, like another bull. It's a ranch, and it's just a bunch of like dairy cows lined up. And what did they call the machine? Do you remember what they called the machine?
I don't remember. What's it called?
I think it was something like the Matchmaker 4000 or something like that. Yeah, it was
the Matchmaker 3000.
Something like that. And it was just like, the scene quickly goes from, you see the implication of them inserting this fucking machine into a bunch of cows, Bobby and Hank being disgusted, and then immediately cuts to Hank and Peggy scrambling to try and put the permission slip back together. It is so quick, but it is just the perfect 1-2 punch. It is that kind of storytelling and jokes that are just perfect.
The flashback to Hank's childhood also proves a couple things. One, how bad his family life was because his dad sucks. But two, also that his dad is a raging pervert, because they're sitting there on the fence watching this happen as Hank is learning the facts of life. And Cotton Hill's just saying like, "What you crying for, boy? This is a good show."
Yeah.
And that is maybe the second thing ever that we have heard from Cotton Hill.
I think that is only the second thing he's ever said in the series.
The first one was in the first episode.
Yeah. And the first... It's a quick thing of him. They quickly establish where he got his shins blown off in the first episode, that's for sure.
I lost my shins from a Japanese machine gunner. You talk to me about your issues.
Yep, exactly.
Speaking of your issues, I want to point out the killer Boomhauer line, stumbling over his words, talking about the things he'd teach Bobby, which ends with, "Her needs, man." And everyone stares at him for a good second and a half before Hank's just like, "You know what? You're right. I got to take care of this."
Yep.
Transition into the dairy farm scene.
I think that's something I so far we've only had a few scenes with Boomhauer, obviously the first two episodes, but I think that despite the joke of him being a mumble mouth and not really getting his words out quickly, Oh, he gets him out quickly, but too quickly.
Yeah.
I think they use that really effectively to make a very poignant joke every time.
Oh, yes.
Because he always ends it with something that is just like far funnier than he was probably actually saying. And I appreciate that.
Everything builds up to like 3 to like 6 words that are funnier if you don't use them in a complete sentence.
Exactly. And I'm happy because I was afraid that joke it's probably going to get old eventually.
Oh, 100%.
But for now it's so novel that I don't mind it. I don't mind it yet.
It is also deeply funny that the show can't decide if the boys, for lack of a better term, can understand him or not. There are a lot of times where it seems like they can, but every so often they pull out a gag where everyone's just staring at him, and then
they just move
can
on.
really fully clarify.
Yeah, he'll say something like the "her needs man" line, and no one really acknowledges it, and then Hank just moves on with the conversation like they didn't even acknowledge what he said.
Hank seems to understand enough that he really doesn't want Boomhauer to teach Bobby anything, but that is like the upper limit of it. It's like, I'm not entirely sure what you said, but I definitely know that that's not how I want to raise my boy. He doesn't need to know about the condom machines you stick a nickel in. Bing bang boom, her needs man.
Yeah. I think that's what this episode does really well, by the way, is the first episode you get some of the side characters. Like, you get a little bit of Dale, you get a little bit of Bill and Boomhauer. I think this episode really puts like Dale into a better spotlight.
Yes.
Where you see how fucking unhinged he is as a character. Him being the catalyst for why Peggy is forced into this position is really it's stupid, but it works because it's so funny.
It's so good, and he's willing to pull out all the stops to try and make sure these things don't happen, but everyone who knows him as a person knows that he is the most harmless individual in the world. Spoken so by Hank explicitly before looking out the window to see him actively struggling to open a beer can outside, spraying it all over himself.
I can't remember if they specifically point out that it's Dale, but I remember Peggy was like, "Oh, the previous teacher got death threats from a crazy right-wing lunatic
job."
And I can't remember if Hank directly knows that it's Dale or he just rolls with it not knowing that it was Dale.
He doesn't the first time, but the next time they meet up while he's trimming the tree, Dale says, "Don't worry about it. I took care of it with one little phone call." And then,
that's right.
Conversation continues, and they talk about how Peggy got picked up, and they talk about how knowledgeable Peggy is in the bedroom now. And then, like, the next time he calls, Hank is the one who picks up the phone to, "You don't know me, but I know where you live." Is this Dale?
No.
"Oh, Hank, can you put Peggy on the phone?" He turns around, shouts to Peggy, "Peggy, it's Dale." She picks up the phone. "You don't know who I am, but I know where you live." And they wrap it up a third time in the after credits as Hank and Peggy, now proud of each other, sort of, making up.
They're having a moment in their house together on the floor.
He sets up a nice time. He sends the kids out. He starts up some music and remembers that Peggy likes dancing. He's a good husband when he tries to be, and that plays into episode 3, but we'll get there.
That's the thing is, like, again, wholesome endings, characters loving each other. You really get the sense that even though they have their clashes and they have their ideals that don't always meet halfway, they still frequently care about each other.
Yeah, they love each other.
It's nice to see when, like, I'm so used to the usual sitcom of, like, characters have to get into pointless arguments or problems and then have, like, a forced ending of, like, reconciliation, where it doesn't feel forced here. It feels like this is naturally what the characters would be doing for that character.
Yeah. And as they are having a wholesome ending on the floor of their living room, the fucking voicemail picks up, and you just hear, "You don't know who I am, but I know where you live, sex ed teacher, and I'm going to make your life miserable if you ever do that again. Also, Hank, we changed the tee-off time to 3 p.m. Funniest thing in the fucking world.
It's like... I'm glad they still ended it with a joke, but man, that is one hell of a joke to end it with.
Yeah, big time. It paints such a good portrait that he is a weirdo extremist who would go to extreme measures to get what he needs done, but is somehow simultaneously as harmless as a fly because he is too stupid to take necessary measures to actually be threatening to anyone who knows of him personally.
Which is funny because I feel like that really it's such a good way to portray Dale because he is so harmless most of the time that it's one of those characters like we talked about it when we did the first episode of this podcast of like, like at least one person like all of these characters.
Oh yeah.
Like you know someone like Bill, you know someone like Dale, and it helps to make the joke of like, yeah, that person would fucking do this because they have no idea of what they're doing is wrong, and they're not harming anyone about it, so you just kind of go like, all right.
I described it last time as like Meemaw saying bad words at the dinner table. It's like,
yeah,
well, you just let them. Who knows how long they've got left in them.
I don't mean to do a segue. I was looking at my notes again. I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you remember? So right before Peggy goes into the high school to actually do the teaching, did you catch something when she was like adjusting her bag?
I sure did, buddy.
Okay, I thought it was just me. And again, there was another one of those scenes where I had to like quickly rewind to make sure that was what I think it was in her bag. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
For those who haven't seen it, when Peggy is ready to finally teach the class, as she does go through with it, she gets all the way to the door of the classroom, ready for anything, to the extent that there is a short joke, as Guard was saying. A suspicious vibrating thing in her bag, which it goes off as she shifts her bag.
And she quickly fixes it, but it's so quickly, and again, no attention's really paid to it except for that quick scene.
Doesn't come up again.
It doesn't come up again. They don't show what's in the bag, and it's good. It's a good joke, but at the same time, it makes you think of like, what the fuck was she preparing for? What?
I mean, she was preparing for everything. She read the whole damn book.
Yeah,
she learned how to say penis.
You know what? She sure
penis.
She screamed vagina so loud.
The whole neighborhood heard you, Peggy.
Oh my god.
And there's a very good moment shortly after her arriving to class where Hank, who pulled Bobby out of class so that he didn't have to deal with it, they have a good conversation at Hank's office about double standards and why it's okay for boys to do things and girls, it's not okay for girls, and
I'm glad.
His mother is very brave to go into a room full of horny teenagers and talk about sex and why it's not okay for Bobby to. And eventually he comes to the conclusion that he needs to bring Bobby along. And Bobby arriving at school is the moment in which Peggy is finally able to muster her confidence to talk about sex properly. Because she had been spending the entire time since arriving to the point that Bobby comes in from Hank's office, putting it off, procrastinating. She
kept introducing herself and slowly like, my name is Mrs. Peggy Hill, spelling it out on the board, like one letter at a time, like taking 10 seconds between each letter to spell it.
You can call me Peggy. You can call me Miss Hill. You can call me Peggy Hill. Any questions? And so on. Bobby arrives and she finally musters up the courage, knowing that her family supports her now. Turns around to the class and says, all right, no more funny business. We're going to learn about sex ed, blah, 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 blah. Now, everyone who's here, listen up. But if your parents didn't sign the permission form, you can go read for an hour in the library. And literally every single classmate gets up and leaves except for Bobby.
Every other student in that class, except for Bobby, is forced to go to the library
because nobody in Arlen was okay with this.
Because everyone in Arlen is an asshole.
And then Bobby looks his mother dead in the eyes and said, well, I guess it's just you and me, Mom. And he says, and she responds like, it sure is, Bobby. Now we're going to learn some sex ed. And they go through the thing, presumably.
That's where it comes full circle because they do the whole like, where Bobby says like, "Oh, do you mean the penis?" And then she's like, "Yes, I do mean the penis." And then they start talking.
And
it's really sweet for such a strange episode. But I think it's like you said, if this were your first exposure, like this was what you thought the pilot was, I think that's a good episode.
It's a very strong starting episode, whether the pilot was aired for you or not.
I think it's a really good character. Like, it has a lot of really good character moments, but also it's just really funny.
Yeah.
There's so many, like, quick sarcastic jokes that I think serve the plot well enough that I don't mind them being really, like, crazy in some spots.
Mm-hmm.
Like you brought up the double standard joke when Bobby was at Hank's
office,
work,
yeah.
and he was like, "That's called the double standard, Bobby," and we got the large end of the stick. It's like,
Don't knock.
Yeah, don't knock it. It's like that is not a line I would expect Hank Hill to say, but god damn it, was it funny.
Oh yeah. Also, when Bobby realizes that he's going to be doing sex ed, and he's giving Joseph toys, the old toys and stuff. He's like, I'm not going to need these when I learn to have sex because I'm going to be too busy dating. Joseph's just like, yeah, who? Bobby's, I don't know. Whoever wants to have sex with me, I guess.
I just think that line is great, but then I just like the idea that why does he have action figures of Friends characters? Because I think he was giving away Chandler and Ross.
He was deciding between Chandler and Ross, and Joseph picked Ross as long as he could shoot BBs at him. It's like, okay,
all right.
I think Bobby wanted to.
Oh my god.
It's such a good episode. There are lots of little bits in it that I would love to talk about, but I think they are better experienced.
We'd be here forever if we covered every little like aspect of the episode because it's just good. Yeah. It's just a funny episode that I think is worth seeing.
Having put it on in the background with the sound off, of course, as we talk about this, I also wanted to mention that within like the first few minutes, as Bobby is bringing in the permission slip, I wanted to notice that there is a picture hanging on the wall in the background behind him that is deliberately low detail. It is a background element, but it is the family in the same pose that shows up in the theme song.
That's great.
With Hank with his arms over like Peggy and Bobby standing in front of him. They have that exact pose in a picture frame on the wall, and there's
that's really funny.
There's a lot of little background details like that are good.
That's really funny. I didn't notice that.
I only got it on my second watch through. I guess third now, since I did watch it twice before this, and then just put it on in the background.
You just put it on the background while you're kind of talking about it, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's they have little background gags. They put a lot of effort into building the world of Arlen here.
They did, and I appreciate it because it makes it. I think it really adds to the world to make like, oh, I want to see what these characters are doing. Mm-hmm. I want to find the jokes. I want to keep experiencing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that kind of has a problem because I don't like the third episode.
Really? You don't like the third episode?
I think it's fine. I would say it's my second least favorite of all of them. It's not the one I said I wouldn't watch again, but I don't know. There's something about this one I didn't like too much. I couldn't get into it. There were some funny bits, but I just couldn't get into it.
Were you ever in the Scouts?
No, I was not.
Okay.
It's probably why I don't get a lot of the nostalgic jokes from it, but I've never been in like the Scouts or anything.
I was in the Scouts, so this was a surprisingly nostalgic thing because I have memories that are a lot like this. Not nearly as abusive, but I have memories like this.
I would. You didn't have to go out into the woods and find a snipe.
Well, actually. Before we get too deep, I want to say that this episode 3 is called "The Order of the Straight Arrow," which seems to be a Boy Scout equivalent. Kind of. It's like a local Boy Scout equivalent. It seems to be a thing that's specifically to the Arlen area, or at least maybe just Texas.
It is also. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'll say it is also insensitive as fuck.
Yes,
but
extremely so. But I have words about that later.
Yeah. I remember loading this episode up because I remember this episode. This was one of the ones I did remember before I watched it, and it was like I couldn't specifically remember how weird they got with it or how insensitive they got with some of the jokes, but I'm glad to say that at least it wasn't as bad as I was expecting.
That's good. With an episode that does get this bad, it's good that it wasn't worse.
It's still pretty bad in spots, but it definitely could have gone way worse depending on how they did it.
Oh yeah. But it's called Order of the Straight Arrow. It's about scouts or scouts equivalent. You know, Boy, Girl Scout doesn't matter. Definitely closer to Boy Scouts, but I've never been a Girl Scout.
No? Oh my god.
So the big four, the four boys in the alley, were reminiscing about their times and being in the Order of the Straight Arrow, and they were having their camping trip coming up. They're, very
the rite of passage type like camping trip.
Yes, rite of passage type camping trip coming up. They invite the boys that don't have children to come along to help out, because that's what their parents did when they were young, because they were apparently all childhood friends. I didn't realize that until this episode.
That was the weird thing, was seeing all the parents together.
Mm-hmm. And they're just
and
older versions of the boys.
Yeah. I knew they were all childhood friends. I knew that already. But seeing all the dads together and they're just almost palette swaps of the adult, it's like, because it was weird seeing Dale's dad without glasses on. Yep. I felt like I was looking at like a broken still. Like
Boomhauer's dad is just like chubbier Boomhauer.
Oh yeah.
But so they're reminiscing about this, and they're going to bring their own to Bobby and Joseph and a couple other local kids, right? They go through a lot of mishaps. There's an incident at the camp. We'll get there when it's relevant. I want to say, I think this was one of my favorite episodes. Not overall, but it had probably my favorite line within the first few minutes of the show, where Bill says with no hesitation,
I'm so depressed I can't even blink.
Yeah, I wrote that one down. Yeah,
it's the last line they say before the theme song. I had to stop and rewind and listen to that again.
No, it's so good. It is such a good line to end the cold open with.
It's such a good line.
I do think the flashback they have is really funny.
It is,
because the way that the thing is, like, they're doing their rite of passage thing where they have to go hunt a snipe.
Yes.
And as they go out into the woods, all four of the boys, they basically give up on it, and they was it a bottle of wine or something?
No, it is a bottle of margarita mix. It is not even
Right.
alcoholic. They can't read that it's not alcoholic.
You're right. I forgot.
Boomhauer
I couldn't remember what exactly
stole
it
it
was
from his dad.
That's right.
He's
and
like,
then Bill
get smacked
takes
up on this, man. Because
Bill
apparently
takes
he always
one...
sounded like that.
Oh yeah. Well, of course, it runs in the family.
Yeah.
Bill takes one drink of it and immediately turns into an alcoholic.
He shudders and is like, "When I grow up, I'm going to drink this every day like my dad."
It's like, oh, that's such a sad line.
Dale takes it, says, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a millionaire and have people killed." Hank takes a sip and says, "I'm going to sell propane and propane accessories as long as I keep my grades up." Takes a sip. Flashback ends. Hard on Bill's face. "I'm so depressed I can't even blink." Hard opening to the theme song.
I guess I should say, the way I kind of put it was like, I didn't really like this episode. I still thought it was funny. Yes. I still enjoyed watching it. Of all of the episodes we watched, it was not my favorite. It was okay.
Yeah.
There were definitely jokes that got to me a lot. Like, I don't remember the context of it. I just have this in my notes. But I wrote down, hearing Boomhauer say pee-pee kills me.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like I don't remember the specific context of why I wrote that down or what made him say that.
I don't remember where that happens, but I know that I also cracked up.
But my neurons firing on all cylinders when I hear Boomhauer do his like motor
Dangle
mouth
pee-pee.
joke and then ending with the word pee-pee fucking destroyed me.
Yes. Oh god. I think a lot of my fondness for the episode really does come from nostalgia from being in the Scouts, because we did do things like the snipe hunt.
Yeah.
Again, not nearly as abusive, because the boys are effectively left to fend for themselves for what might be the entire night.
Right.
Mostly just so that the dads could have a time to just sit and drink beer alone without having to worry about the kids.
Yeah, it's all bullshit, and some of the boys catch on to that. Like Joseph immediately catches that this whole thing is bullshit, and I think that is a good aspect of it. Like, the pushing between like Bobby blindly believing his father, but also kind of coming to terms with, my dad is also a person too who's like fallible.
Yes.
I do think there are good moments in it. Like I said, I definitely think if you had the sort of Scouts experience, you would definitely get a lot more from this.
Yeah, and that's entirely true. it. So they go to the camp. They talk about various things. Peggy has an amazing B plot, which has such a weird build-up.
I was so confused. Like, I wrote down a couple times, like, what is this side plot building up to? I did not remember it in the slightest, because I was like, for the record, as the guys are getting ready to go on their camping trip, Peggy's like rushing them out the door for some reason. She's like in her bathrobe.
Yeah, she's in her morning bathrobe. She's really rushing them on, and they comment on it, and she's like, no, why would I be trying to rush you out? Here's your stuff getting good. Goodbye. Go.
It's really sudden to get them out of the house, and it's like, okay, something's happening here, and it's obviously not what you expect it to be initially, but then it turns into just like at least 5 different cutaways of Peggy driving and going to different like areas and going really far away.
Yeah.
To the point where she has a fake name at one point. And
so before we get too far in that, I need to point out, she is so determined in this that when the truck doesn't start, Hank says, oh, it'll be a couple hours before we get going. I got to get someone to come and give me a jump or something like that. She, out of sheer force of will, gets behind the truck, tells him to put it in neutral, and pushes him enough to get the battery started again. Sees them off. Drops the robe like a hitman disguise, revealing her normal clothes. Grabs the keys, gets in the car, and leaves. And
it's so insane.
And for most of the rest of the episode until the very end, you just see clips of her going so far out of her way, driving for like miles and miles and miles.
Presumably hours, presumably like even like maybe a day at one point. I can't remember.
She withdraws money from a bank under a different name. Sorry, no, she gets a hotel room under a different name.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Mm-hmm. She withdraws money from the ATM and then burns the receipt.
Yeah, it's like I understand that's the point of the joke, is that it's such a big build up that you're to subvert your expectations, but at the same time, it's the way they do it is so fucking weird that it feels really out of place.
Not knowing where the climax is going is so fucking confusing. It's funny in hindsight. It is not that funny until you see the climax.
You feel like you're missing part of the joke, which you are. You are missing part of the joke.
Yeah.
But it feels like you're missing like an intentional thing that you thought the show might have told you already, but it didn't. Mm-hmm. It's constantly dangling this idea of like you don't know what's going on in front of you.
It's coming so close to teasing the idea of like a second family, a second life, and the ultimate climax of it is funny by its own right. But we'll get to that in a minute. So the boys are at camp. They're doing exactly what their parents did, which was telling them to do stupid bullshit. The children are annoying Hank and Bill enough that Hank decides to enact one of the sacred rites of the Order of the Sacred Arrow, which is the silent stick. So long.
Slim Jims.
Yes. So long as, for a day, they're sworn to silence, and every time they speak up, they lose a
part
fifth
of the stick.
A part of a stick, which is, some sacred thing that they made up. Which, by the way, they asked John Redcorn, the only Native American in the show, some kooky Native shit to bring into it because the kids will like it.
And John Redcorn has a line of like, "Oh, we have many sacred rituals that are like important to our people," and Hank just goes, "Oh, we that's perfect. We'll take any sacred ritual."
Yeah,
it's like that's not what he's saying. God damn it!
Hank's writing notes, and Redcorn comes back with like, "It's very sacred. It's very important." I think Hank says back like, "Well, it's just us."
Yeah, exactly. Something of like, well, we love sacred stuff. We won't tell anybody. It's like
it's just like it's not a big deal. It's just us. And it's like, well, it's not what he's saying.
And so basically,
also Dale saying like, Redcorn, we're gonna be out of town for a couple days, taking the kids on the Order of the Straight Arrow. Redcorn immediately, I would love to take care of your wife.
Yeah.
All of the other men look to Dale like they know what's going on, and Dale says, well, that's flattering, but also
it's just like, God damn it. I think what really sets me off on this episode is them just like immediately co-opting this like spirit of like Redcorn's like tribe and stuff, and they just constantly keep using it as the justification,
mispronouncing
of, like,
it constantly, teaching it to the kids.
Mispronouncing it. Yeah, exactly. To the point where it becomes like a major like part of the episode's like finale. And it's just like, man, this is definitely a late 90s, early 2000s episode, huh?
Sure is. But they get these silent sticks, which are just Slim Jims, which are reminiscent of what they had to deal with kids. But Hank's being a little bit nicer to them than his dad was to him, right?
A little bit.
A little bit, because there was one shot when he was a kid. You break your silence, and you have to tend to the father's whims all night.
Yep.
But for the boys, they get like 5 shots, right? You know, you can take 5 bites out of the sacred silence stick, just a Slim Jim, and before you break your oath of silence. Bobby sucks at upholding the silence.
Well, in fairness, like, there's a point where they're driving and Hank and Bill purposely like set up the boys where they're constantly trying to come up with ways to make the boys talk.
Yes.
And because Bill is hungry and he wants to take a bite of the sticks.
At one point, Bill just says, like,
who wants $1?
Who wants a nickel? Bobby's like, I do. Hank just has like a minute. She's like, Bobby, you've lost 3 bites of your stick already. Now give Mr. Daw try of your stick. You gotta be careful or you're gonna run out. He can't manage them enough that by the time they get to the camp, they start up the campfire saying like, oh, the 24 hours oath of silence is on pause, and everyone's relieved.
Well, the thing is like, it's another one of those moments where the characters actually feel like they're friends because Hank and Bill purposely like messing with the boys, and it's like they're messing with them, and it's very low stakes. They're not like being mean to the boys necessarily. They're just like fucking with them a little bit.
Yeah,
and that's why it's like, oh, this is just a fun scene of Hank and Bill being friends and messing with like their younger generation behind them.
And in the other car, Dale and Boomhauer are driving along near them, not too close, but Dale decides to moon the boys.
Yeah.
Twice. To disastrous effect the first time.
What does he run through? It's not corn, was it? What was he?
They were just driving a little too close to bushes because Boomhauer wasn't focusing, and he just scratched the hell out of his butt. You just have this moment of like Boomhauer panicked trying to steer away from them, and Dale screaming as bushes are scraping at his ass.
Just destroying him as they drive by.
And somehow he finds it in his heart to do it a second time later to try and tease the boys into giving up their sticks again. But they get to the campsite. Their camp neighbors are a bunch of environmental activists.
Just call them hippies. That's
plays
what they
into
call
things.
They definitely call them hippies once or twice.
Yeah, Dale more so than the others.
Oh, absolutely.
We have the snipe hunt. Where they send the boys out into the woods to hunt snipe, which does not exist. Armed only with sticks or whatever they can find, and
they have to say the sacred snipe call.
Yes.
Do you remember the call?
I do not.
It's woolulu. Woolulu.
That's right.
There you go. There you
go. And so they send the boys out, and they sneak away from the hunt, quote unquote, so that they can like sit around the campfire and have a beer like their dads did. Only to immediately be beset by tragedy as Bobby claims to have found a snipe and pulls it out of the bush, only to discover that it is an endangered heron, which is native to the area.
Yeah. There's only like 5 or something left, I think they said, in the area.
They repeatedly illustrate that there is like a single-digit number of them left in the wild. And they have no idea how to dispose of this heron that Bobby has clubbed to death in the darkness of the night. And they are constantly lying to Bobby because they don't want him to understand what kind of crime he just committed or what the consequences may be for everyone. They stash it in an ice chest, a cooler, overnight.
And then they stash it in the cooler, and then a park ranger comes by the next morning looking for the heron. And
we got a tracker on this heron, and it was last spotted at your campsite. Have you seen anything?
I think the funniest thing about that scene is the way that the officer is very blunt about the things he says with a very funny accent, but also he was also apparently part of the Straight Arrow at one point when he was a kid. So he writes off a lot of the weird way they're acting as the Straight Arrow.
Dale is... The moment the heron gets clubbed, Dale is out. Like, he is ready to betray everyone to bail out. Bill takes his keys so he can't escape, but he has tried enough times by morning that he has been tied up in his underwear.
Yep.
The park ranger comes by, asks about the heron, can't find it, and sees that Dale in his underwear tied up, and asks,
because he tries to get out of the tent.
Why is your friend tied up like that? Hank just says, "Oh, it's Order of the Straight Arrow. You know how it is." And the park ranger just, "You're right. I was part of the Straight Arrow too. Carry on." And drives away.
Did you notice I'm sure you did. It's pretty obvious, but in the background of that scene when they're talking to the ranger, in Boomhauer's tent. They're talking, everyone else is talking, and Boomhauer's tent opens up, and a random lady comes out and walks off.
I remember that, exits.
It's just like, it's such a quick background gag, but it's like, I'm pretty sure that's one of the environmentalists just coming out of Boomhauer's tent. It's like,
it wasn't any of the ones that spoke, but it's definitely one of them.
I'm fairly certain by the way she was like dressed and stuff, it was supposed to be one of the environmentalists, and it's just such a quick background gag that they don't even pay attention to it. It happens in the background of the conversation, and then they just move on from there.
Yeah. Bobby is desperate to send the heron off to God, what's the fictional god's name again?
So the god's name that they keep mispronouncing is Wimatanye.
Wimatanye. The god's name is Wimatanye.
Wimatanye. And they just, I don't remember what, again, I feel bad because I should have wrote it down, but they keep mispronouncing the name of this like god that John Redcorn told them about. That's like the main joke. But Bobby is convinced that like this heron is like a test.
Yes.
And he's supposed to like give him a proper burial of like a few rituals to like, when they're driving off with the heron, he puts the bird out the window to give it like flight.
Yes.
And stuff like that.
One of the first things that happens is like they open up the cooler to find where the heron is, and it's gone. And that happens while the ranger's there. And when the ranger leaves, they have a panic and start running around and find that Bobby has taken it out, has stood on a rock, and is raising it to the sky, trying to have Wimatanye take it back. Right?
I forgot about that. That's right.
And that's where the environmentalists see it. And they clue the ranger in that Hill and his family are to blame for this missing heron. So they stuff it in the car and they take it out, and Bobby takes it out of the car window and starts like trying to make it flap its wings so that it can fly if they drive fast enough. As they're being chased by the park ranger and the environmentalists who have noticed that they've left. Eventually, it culminates in like it falling down a hill into like a small what's it called?
No, that's not. No, it doesn't fall down or anything. They purposely stop on the side of the road.
Oh, that's right. They were going to bury it.
They were going to bury it, but then they try to stuff the heron into a storm drain.
Yes, into a drain pipe. Yeah.
And it's like there's this small scene of I think it's Hank trying to stuff this dead bird into a pipe, and it looks so stupid.
Yeah,
it just won't go.
And Bobby is upset by this, partially because he's only now figuring out that his dad is capable of lying and being dishonest, but also because he's watching his dad try to stuff a very valuable and important bird into a drain pipe, and it just kind of ends up flopping into the water. As the environmentalists and the ranger catch up with them, Bobby is still hard set on the fact that Wimatanye is testing him.
He's using like the water in the storm drain area to like try and cleanse the bird.
Yes. and as then, all of the consequences are coming in,
the bird wakes up. It's a Wimatanye miracle.
It's a Wimatanye Day miracle. Middle of summer, middle of July, Wimatanye Day. Because Bobby had knocked the bird unconscious, and it wakes up at that moment.
Yeah,
presumably from the cold water.
Yeah, he didn't kill the bird, but he basically just whacked it unconscious for like half a day.
Yeah,
and it woke back up finally and flew off. I think
in front of everyone.
In front of everyone, and so everyone's all happy about it.
The ranger just kind of shrugs his arms and says, "Well, I guess the bird's fine. You're free to go."
Well, he specifically says, I think he says knocking out a heron isn't illegal, but it is like frowned upon or something.
So get going.
Yeah, so please leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you have anything else you want to say before I make a comment? Do you remember what Bobby says near the end of the episode after he resurrects the bird?
No.
And he's like, he just impressed. He's like, I'm a shaman, and he starts splashing water at Hank with the
I'm a
storm
shaman, Dad.
It's like
Hank complains about having a headache, so Bobby starts flinging water at him to heal him.
Yeah, thinking it'll heal him.
Yeah,
and it's just like,
healing.
God damn it, little shit.
I truly believe that Bobby is a Wimatanyan shaman.
You know what? I shouldn't be quick to judge. I should have believed all along.
Yeah, he was doing all the rituals. It took him half a day to do all those rituals. It's hard stuff.
This episode is... I think overall the episode is funny. Kind of talking about it with you makes me kind of appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think the funniest joke in the episode, though, is just realizing what Peggy's adventure was all about.
Yes. As they're coming home, we get to see the end of Peggy's adventure. She has spent a day and a half driving to a shoe store specifically for women's shoes that are bigger and wider than average.
Yeah, just basically clown feet is the way I would describe it, because the way they present it is like it's specifically a store for huge feet women.
Yeah.
Not just like a little bit bigger, but it's like...
Let me see if I can find the name of the store. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah, because there's a frame when she goes in. She's still under a false name, by the way. Like, the store owner knows her, but only knows her under this false alias.
It's Senora something or other.
It's so weird that she's just going on this big adventure, false alias, false bank account, apparently, to buy...
From Lubbock's very big shoes, fashions for the large-footed lady.
That's what it was.
Which is so far out that I think the joke is that she's gone to Mexico.
I think so, yeah. I believe so.
So she buys some shoes, which have been hand-selected for her by the owner, by the way. She walks past this collage of like signed pictures from big-footed female celebrities, right? She applauds them on their discretion and how they're going to put it in a discreet box.
It's
they
like
select
a drug
shoes
deal
for her. Yeah, it's like crocodile skin shoes. And she brings them home as the boys are coming home, and you see her filing off part of the size.
Number.
Her size is size 16. She files the 1 off. But because the box is massive, Hank's looking in at her. He's like, "Oh, what'd you get up to?" "Nothing. Bought a microwave." Just idly, Hank just mentions, "Oh, this family goes through microwaves like any normal family goes through shoes."
Oh my God, that's right.
And
I didn't
then
catch
walks
that.
off.
Oh my God, I didn't catch that joke. You're right. Holy shit.
Yeah. And then carries on about her day. That's the end of the episode.
Oh my God. No, I totally didn't catch that joke at the end. You're right. Now I'm thinking about it. Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
It is. All of this effort is set up like this like Mexican drug deal, but she's just getting really big shoes. By the way, as someone with very big feet, where I also have to go and find good shoes, I really like that joke.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I totally get it. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a joke it's such a cleverly well done joke that it kind of does pay off the whole trip in a way.
It does.
I still think that the setup is really weird.
The setup is a bit much. It's so funny in retrospect, but it's only funny in retrospect.
Yeah, I think this episode, again, talking through it with you makes me appreciate it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more than I said at the beginning, where I said I didn't really like it that much. There's a lot of jokes in here that I think about that are really good, but I guess as a whole, I just didn't. It's something about it just didn't mesh well with me. It's fine. It's not my favorite.
It's definitely a lot of like Scouts humor.
Yeah.
I was a Scout. I was a camp counselor in training for a short time. So I definitely put kids through some of these similar antics when I had the chance. And I did it because I also had to go through them by someone else's hand, right?
Well, yeah, you want to give someone the same experience you had.
Exactly. I was a scout in Texas. I went through, campgrounds kind of like this. I had gone to a big scouts meeting out in the desert where we were expected to perform dubiously, safe tasks alone with nothing but a map and a compass. That it was during that trip that I accidentally slept on a cactus and had the worst sleep of my life.
You mean that sleeping on a cactus isn't super comfortable?
Yeah, no, funny
That
thing.
sounds awful.
See, the crazy thing about cactus is that they have these things called needles, and even when you put a tent on it accidentally in the middle of the night, and then also a thin foam pad to lay your sleeping bag on, those needles still stick clean through. I woke up with my back red from all the spikes.
Oh my god!
I was so tired that I didn't notice in the night, but it hurt.
Free acupuncture. Acupuncture.
Yeah, it unlocked my chakras. And that's where I am today, actually. Thank you, Dr. Cactus.
Thank you, Dr. Cactus. I feel so much better about my life.
Yeah. But, even with the weird things and the weird consequences and Dale being in his underwear for the entirety of the last third of the show, I had a lot of experiences that were nostalgic in a way. Maybe not. Maybe not on Dale's side, but I think that's where a lot of the humor struck for me. If I didn't have all that, I think I would find it as kind of like a plain episode, not super interesting.
Yeah. Like I still think it's fine. I'm not about to be like, oh, I don't want to watch this episode. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's an okay episode for me.
Yeah, I just remember a lot of things about this.
I tell you what you do, man. That dang old hand of the water trick gonna work every time, man. You just put it in water like that, and it's spent a whole dadgum day like that clean up that dang old pee-pee.
It's not an okay. I'm sorry. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, please go ahead. Please.
I was totally about to segue to the next one.
No, that's perfect. I was also going to.
I don't like this next episode at all.
This one is my least favorite.
Yes, same. I did not like the Willie Nelson episode. I
learned a lot about Willie Nelson as a person.
I did too.
This episode is kind of boring.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an episode of we got a celebrity to come on the show, so that's all we're gonna do with it is we have a celebrity jokes.
I think there's a little bit of that. I think it's also a little bit of we got a celebrity to come on our show. It's season 1. It's episode 4. We can't do anything too crazy or we're gonna scare them off.
Right. And
so it sets up a lot about the world and Arlen specifically, and a little bit about Hank's relationship with Peggy and
his overall
Bobby.
Family.
But the antics that go on in this episode are tame at strongest
and boring at worst.
Yeah. The jokes don't land super hard. The ending few moments are really, really nice. But it doesn't tell us a whole lot, and it doesn't have hard-hitting jokes. A lot of it is talking about how it is to be an older adult with a younger kid and not really connecting.
I think the highlight of the episode is the I'm about to bust line, and that's pretty early on in the episode.
Yes, yeah. The song that comes in at the very end is very sweet. I think that is a very good moment for the family. But the vast majority of the episode doesn't really do much.
It's funny, you said it is a sweet moment, but my last note on this episode, the last thing I wrote about this episode is just Hank's Peggy song sucks.
It does. Yeah. All of this build-up, talking about how Hank values his guitar and how much he wants to be a famous guitarist, with Willie Nelson's help, of course.
Yeah.
And how much, music means to him and practicing and playing. And then he plays this song, which is sweet for his wife, not very good as a standalone song.
It's just... Yeah.
He seems to stumble over the lyrics, and it seems like he wrote this a long time ago.
Definitely probably a high school song or something.
Yeah, definitely high school song. Definitely pre-marriage.
I'm looking through. This is definitely the episode I've wrote the least amount of notes for, and I think that's kind of indicative to the over. Because I was trying to think of how do we describe this episode, or how do we explain what this episode's about, and the episode is really just Hank has a crush on Willie Nelson, and by happenstance of the episode, they meet him, that's about it.
I think, aside from the overabundance of Carrot Top jokes,
yeah.
Yeah, I think
Did Did you know Celery Head makes $3 million a year?
Oh my God, does he make $3 million a year? I don't believe that. I think this episode is defeated a little bit when Willie Nelson himself says the moral out loud.
Yeah.
To those who haven't seen it, Hank is getting into repeated issues with Bobby as Bobby is using his things to just kind of cause ruckus because he's bored and not very good at managing his boredness in a productive way, right? Like literally every 11-year-old in the world.
Yeah, he's being a kid that's just like, I need constant attention and feedback.
He needs stimulation, right? He needs to
be engaged. He has a lot of energy and a lot of just, he is the poster child for ADHD, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, big time. And the only things he really has to play with when his friends aren't around are like Hank's things. So he mimics the Carrot Top analog character by doing some prop comedy on Hank's prized guitar by playing it with a block of cheese. He accidentally unlocks Hank's mower and drives it into his car. He takes Hank's, prized 9-iron and starts hitting dog poop with it because he's bored. And all of this results in Hank being extremely disappointed in him, but also just very frustrated because Bobby doesn't have a role model. All these things, he talks about this with the boys.
And honestly, how dare Hank? Because Bobby has some gamer role models, okay? Including
that's right, yes.
Another kid like his age is his role model because he did like the best at a video game that just came out or something.
And then the second best kid at that video game, who Hank finds to be an unwashed freak.
I think that is the worst character portrait I've seen in this show.
Yes.
He is just he looks
he's
like
a mole man.
He looks like a hairy thumb mole man.
Yeah, he's like a naked mole rat was a kid.
Oh, God, it's so
in a
gross.
dark room on their computer, definitely not resembling us at all. We have some good moments from like Dale and Bill and Boomhauer, but they're not huge.
There's decent jokes and moments throughout the episode, but the whole thing is just very much just
Willie Nelson.
Hank loves Willie Nelson. He's dreaming about him at the start of the episode. He keeps dreaming about him throughout the episode.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a point where, again, when Bobby crashes his lawnmower into his truck, did you catch what Hank said when he woke up? Because he was napping.
I don't remember.
He said, he was like, Willie, look out, that's traffic, as he hears like the crash.
That's right, yeah.
And it's like, he's constantly dreaming about Willie Nelson. Like, what? This is not healthy. It's not a healthy obsession at all.
Not at all. Willie Nelson, I've come to learn, is a pretty solid dude, but definitely not deserving of this obsession.
It's just so weird. It feels like an episode where a lot of characters are out of character. Like,
a little bit.
Hank doesn't feel like Hank in this episode. It feels like a writer or like even just Mike Judge himself being like, I really like Willie Nelson and his music.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make an episode with Willie Nelson.
And again,
obviously,
it
like
is episode 4 of this show we just started. We can't beef it now. We have to play it kind of safe.
You can't do too much with your guest stars just yet because you don't want to scare off other potential like voice actors. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, do you know much about like later season like Simpsons?
Not too much, no.
I don't know a lot about it either. I haven't seen a lot of the episodes, but I have seen a lot of episodes of like later season Simpsons love to have celebrities in their episodes.
Yes.
And a lot of time it's literally just the celebrity is the joke.
Yeah.
The celebrity being there is like, I remember the one where it was Elon Musk walking in and like Lisa does this really weird thing of like, it's like Dad, that's Elon Musk. He's probably the greatest inventor of our timeline. It's like, what are you
she sounds like she's reading off of his Wikipedia page.
Yeah. It feels like someone is holding Lisa at gunpoint and telling her, read off this canned like script we gave you that like fillets this celebrity.
Doesn't she get in the same situation with like Cher and Lady Gaga in different episodes as well?
All the time. Like later episodes keep doing that, and that's what I got from this episode of just like, it feels like they just wanted to be like, hey, look, we got Willie Nelson. And again, early season. Don't want to scare the celebrities off. I get it, but I feel like you could have at least done something a little bit more than Bobby hits Willie Nelson with a golf club.
Yes,
and
so
then
that is the key point of the episode. Is like 2/3 of the way in, they go golfing with Bobby because he needs a role model. Bobby does one really good shot, and everyone's impressed with him. They have him do it again, and he swings his club so hard that he knocks out a fellow golfer, which turns out to be the Willie Nelson, not a dream.
Just by happenstance.
Guy.
Just by happenstance.
Gives him a concussion. And through Hank's very verbal disappointment and frustrations, which Bobby overhears through an open window, he decides to go off on his own to find Willie Nelson and have him sign Hank's guitar.
Sign his, yeah. And it's like that's a sweet gesture, but at the same time it becomes this idea of like, well, okay, you can just get to Willie Nelson, you can just get him to sign the thing, and then we should talk about the rest of the episode before I say what I'm going to say. But it's just like it becomes a weird like loop of just celebrity worship.
Yes. So the Willie Nelson lives outside of his repossessed estate because he has horrible problems with the IRS.
Yes,
which is very real. And Willie Nelson is playing the same Game Boy game that Bobby really likes. So they kind of bond over that. Willie Nelson does not seem to be aware that Bobby is the one who gave him a concussion. But, regardless of that, they bond.
There is a funny line, though.
Yes.
When he's asking, Willie Nelson's asking if he's the guy that, or the kid that cuts his lawn. And he was like,
I'm the one who hit you with a golf club.
And he's like, you trim my lawn with a golf club? I want my nickel back or something like that.
Because he's only paying the kid so much.
It's like a funny line, but it still feels really out of place. Like it's like, I get that's a joke and it's funny, but I don't know.
Yeah. So they bond over that. Willie and Bobby are having a great time. Bobby calls home to tell Hank to come by. Hank doesn't believe him, obviously, because he's been very disappointed. Willie himself gets on the phone, and Hank does this beautiful pog face.
Did you? Sorry, I don't mean to keep being like, did you hear this line? But do you remember what Hank said when Bobby first says he has Willie Nelson there?
No, I don't remember.
He's like, you're poking the gorilla in the monkey house.
What a good line.
And I'm like, what is... It's a hell of a line, Hank.
And then Willie Nelson's like, no, there's nothing funny about this. Come on down. And he's organized like a hangout with a bunch of other celebrities just on his front lawn, his repossessed front lawn. Peggy is frustrated with him because Hank keeps making jokes that put like the guitar above her in his mind. And that's her B plot.
Yeah, her whole B plot is that she's angry about Hank's obsession with both Willie Nelson and his guitar. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it feels like this episode feels like one you would see like later on in a show where they're kind of running out of ideas for plots.
A little bit,
and they're
yeah.
like, well, what conflict can we make? Hank loves his guitar and Peggy doesn't.
Yes. And
there is another sort of like C plot going on with Luann still trying to learn and do like her cosmetic test.
It doesn't really go anywhere though.
The punchline of the joke is she's bad at doing braids.
Yes.
And when she goes to do her braiding test, she braids her hands in the braid.
Yes.
So she basically gets herself stuck, and that's like the whole plot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like
it's such a nothing burger.
Yeah, that's honestly the whole episode. It's just like a lot of different plots that do meld together, but none of them are interesting. Mm-hmm. At least to me.
So this all culminates in the party, right? Hank and Peggy both get called down at different times. Hank's call to Peggy comes with a request to bring his guitar strap, which she's not happy with because she kind of would have liked her husband to call her down to the party for her company.
Yeah.
But he wants to practice with Willie Nelson, and he does, and she shows up and starts getting flirted with by a celebrity that I don't remember the name of.
That's the thing. It was like, I was trying to figure out like who each celebrity was. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get a full list because it was just, it definitely felt like a moment of like, these are celebrities you would probably know if you were like an adult in the 90s.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like,
all these people are dead now.
Well, it's not even that so much that none of them are dead, but most of them are like not relevant.
Yeah,
you know
y'all haven't done anything in 23 years.
So it's like watching it now, it's like, I feel like a lot of the jokes are lost on me.
A little bit, yeah, and I think that's probably where some of it is, but she gets flirted with. She makes a one-off line saying, like, the guy says, you want me to lay him out? And she says, oh, honey, no. Hank would destroy you. I'm going to go talk to him. And she gets up
Hank
and
would
she's...
flatten you.
Yeah, and she gets up and she's going to go, like, give him a piece of her mind. But after Hank has a conversation with Willie Nelson, in which Willie explicitly says the moral of the episode, like,
yep.
Hank, I don't know if Bobby needs another role model. He's using your golf club, playing your guitar, and riding your lawnmower. I think you're his role model.
It's like, thanks, Willie.
Thanks, Willie. And Hank decides he's going to bond with Bobby by, like, bringing him over to the couch and playing him a song to teach him how to play, teaching him how to do something that Hank likes, and Bobby is receptive. And the song that he decides to play for Bobby is a song that he wrote for Peggy before they got married. And hearing that happen unprompted seems to remind Peggy that he does love her, even if he's an ass about it. It gets resolved in this kind of like nothing burger way, and I hate to say that twice, but it's very tame. It's a
accurate.
Sweet moment, but it's not much.
It's a nice moment, but man, does it not feel great. It just feels like they just kind of like, well, we have to end the episode now.
Yeah. And
they
they figuratively ride into the sunset after that.
Well, that's the thing is, like, do you remember the ending shot?
Not
where
well,
it's like
no.
it's zooming out, and it's kind of like zooming out on Willie Nelson watching Peggy and Hank reconcile, and there's this. It's part of the joke, but there's like sparkles floating over him, like he's a god. But you find out that it's Luann practicing braiding on his hair while also using a sparkle hairspray to make it look like from the way the shot was going out. It's like, oh, the light is like sparkling on him. Yeah. And it just leads to that same feeling of they just wanted to like make Willie Nelson feel really cool.
And I
don't know,
they got me to care more about Willie Nelson than anyone else had in my life, but also it's not a lot.
That's not saying a lot considering, you know, everything else about the episode was just kind of not great.
I gave this episode a C.
That's fair. I still don't think it's a bad. I don't think we have had a bad episode yet.
No, it's just kind of bland.
Yeah, this one feels like an episode they wrote in between two really good episodes, and like, well, we need a filler one. We need something else for this season.
Yes.
I sell propane and propane accessories. I tell you what. Shut up, Dale.
Episode 5.
Before we get into it, how did you feel overall about this episode? Because I think I really like this one.
I really liked it, and I liked it more once I rewatched some of the earlier episodes and saw the through lines.
Right.
Did you? So episode 5, Luann's Saga, is about Luann breaking up with her boyfriend. Did you notice? Go ahead.
I was say the whole episode is about like Luann trying to figure out who she is and what she like, the kind of people she wants to be around and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that is all culminated. That all pours in after she and her boyfriend break up.
Right.
Did you notice that her boyfriend is the store clerk that Hank was furious with in the pilot?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I absolutely noticed it. Do you want to know something? He is a major character.
I know I've seen him in future episodes. It took me until like this morning when I rewatched some of them to realize it was the same guy.
Yeah, Buckley is a very important character. I know that because I've seen episodes with him later on that are extremely important to like the overall character arcs of a lot of different characters.
The mythos of the hill.
The mythos of the King of the Hill. But no, like genuinely, like Buckley becomes a very important character out of nowhere in some spots. So that was like, I literally wrote that on my notes, and the second thing when I saw him come on screen, I'm like, oh no, it's Buckley. There he is. Yeah, I overall thoughts of, I like this episode a lot. Like, it's top of the discussion. I really like this one.
I really like this one too. The last time we recorded, I think I said that I was very eager to see more of Luann because I never saw anything much from her.
Yeah.
And this episode was a very good way of getting into her character and why it's worth paying attention to. And I'm a Luann fan now, I have to say. She's fun to watch. She already was from the like bit gags from earlier episodes, but this one all about her was good.
she can be a really good character when they have good writing around her. She can also be a little overbearing, because I know some later episodes she's not the most fun to watch. Well, I think when she's done well, she's either a really funny character or a really tragic one, because Luann goes through a lot of shit in her stories. Like,
and she doesn't have control over any of it. Things just happen to her.
Things just keep happening around her while she's just trying to like live her life and be better about things.
Yeah.
And it's you no matter how dumb or silly or weird she might seem, you can't help but feel bad for her as a character, because she just is trying her best despite the circumstances around her, and you can't help but like at least sympathize with that a little bit.
Yeah. And in this episode where she spends the first half of it crying.
That's honestly full props to her voice actress, because god damn, she was giving it her all in those like crying. Like it hurt me to listen to, because it sounded so real. Like, I know it's just acting, but holy shit, she was giving it her all.
Oh yeah, no, it was fantastic the entire time. Not even for a second was there even the thought that Luann, the character, might be faking it.
It wasn't even just like those typical like, oh, a character crying so they're just like sniffling and sobbing. It's like full on like throat slashing wailing and like gross sniffling, and
she's snotty. She's like blowing her nose. She's having a really rough time. It is the ugliest cry of her life for a boy that we reveal she's only been together with for like 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah. And God, so she Hank is frustrated because she's staying in his den, which used to be like his private space in the house, but she's staying there because of her parents' stuff. Over. Yeah. And she's about to go out with her boyfriend, but he breaks up with her like in the street. Nobody.
Yeah, like Buckley comes over to like presumably go on a date with her, and then she goes as like she goes up. Does she even hop on his bike? I think
she hops on his bike. They get maybe 20 feet down the road. She gets off and runs back sobbing.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I knew they were down the street a little bit, but I couldn't remember why.
Yeah, they didn't even turn the corner. They don't even talk about why she got broken up with. It's never mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, Buckley is Buckley. Buckley do as Buckley do.
And
he seems like a weird flake.
That's illustrated very well, as in one of the earliest scenes in which she's talking about like how hard it is to get over him. She's showing off, or she's not showing off. She's looking through these like mall photo booth pictures, and it's just her doing all these lovey-dovey poses while Buckley is standing stock still like a mannequin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
He never changes facial expression at any time. He's always just kind of like that. Despite that, she seems to have loved him.
I think there was a line like a little bit like later. It's still early in the episode, but she was like, they went to like a buffet or something, and only Buckley would get a plate, and she would just eat off of it to avoid paying or something like that.
Yeah, it's when Hank does his moves, it gets her to get over him. She starts just complaining about him in a way that Hank loves.
Hank like, becomes a gossip.
But like we get to hear about Buckley a little bit and how he's just kind of this mildly negligent dick. He's nothing more than a dick, but he is a dick.
He's just an idiot that like, you know, he doesn't seem to necessarily mean like harm towards anyone. He's just an idiotic teenager.
He's just a mindless teenager. He doesn't think about what he does, and he doesn't seem to think much in the first place.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't.
Yeah. So she's distraught. A good old Aunt Peggy is trying to get Hank to understand that it just takes time to get over. There's this kind of expected standard that like, oh, she's going to cry for the length of time that like the relationship lasted. And he's like, oh, 3 weeks? It's going to be 3 weeks of this? And she tells him explicitly, do not interfere. Do not tell her anything. Just say you look pretty and nothing more. And that does not go over well.
I just think it was funny because I wrote it down, and it's, you look pretty, and then she specifically says she just needs to hear it from a man. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so she later on, she's sobbing over the back of the couch, and he's like building himself up to it. He just says, you look pretty. And she blows up at him. She's like, her mascara streaking, which she's clearly reapplied since, breaking up. And she's staring at him like, I just got broken up with, and you telling me I'm pretty? Something like that. But he teaches her about repressing your feelings, swallowing it down, keeping it in your stomach. It's gonna hurt. That's part of it. But then
Therapist
you don't.
Hank in full effect.
Mm-hmm, and then you don't feel it anymore.
You just don't think about it.
That works. She tucks it away. She doesn't cry anymore. And then she and Hank have an unexpectedly great time, as if they were like buddies in a comedy movie, just getting up to antics. They're eating cookie dough, and apparently Hank's just never eaten plain cookie dough before.
Yeah, they're just hanging out. They're just going out like late at night and having fun.
One line that really struck with me is that they're like eating cookie dough out of a tube with spoons, by the way.
Yeah.
Almost like eating a burrito with a spoon. It's so weird. He's like, I didn't know you didn't have to cook this. She leans in, like, they make ice cream with cookie dough in it. He is so astonished that he tells her to bring him his keys,
Bring the keys,
so that they can go out and buy ice cream immediately. And they do. They come back so late at night that Peggy is up waiting for them. Like, what did you do?
My favorite part of the end of that scene is the where Peggy's upset that Hank's getting involved. Yes. He just. You look pretty today.
Hey, hold on. You can't get past me on this.
And then he does it twice. He does it twice and it works.
She falls for it immediately.
It's so fucking funny. Just seeing
Hank has unlocked a new skill that he will use as it's convenient.
Oh my god.
It's so good.
It's such a good scene.
Mm-hmm. But they get her to calm down, and they decide to go to their favorite bar, which as far as I'm aware is like a square dance bar.
It's like a square dance bar where they just go out and dance with your family and friends and hang out.
Yep, common in the South. To go find her a boyfriend. Everyone's interested in going in, but they explicitly go to find her a boyfriend without Peggy noting.
Yeah, so Bill is on distraction duty with Peggy to dance with her, and he's like, well, I don't know, I've never danced with someone, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, so quickly, just happy to be the distraction with Peggy.
One of the earliest points in the series where he reveals that he has this weird fascination with Peggy.
Yeah.
Which I believe comes up quite a lot after this.
Did you, so as they're going to this bar, they're all talking about, like, the kind of people that they think would be good with Luann. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what Dale said he's going to be looking for?
No.
He said he's going to look for a round, muscular butt.
That's right.
And it's just like there's a point where all the characters are clearly like looking for different people. Like Boomhauer's at the bar talking to a dude, or Boomhauer's at a table talking to a dude, and a girl walks up to Boomhauer and takes him onto the dance floor.
Yep.
Effectively, he gets distracted and doesn't help. Mm-hmm. But Dale is in the bathroom using the urinal,
he's
standing next to a guy.
Leans back a little bit.
Yeah. Looking at the dude's ass. I don't remember what exactly he says, but he basically like implies
just say,
like
nice butt,
something like that.
Yeah,
and it's just like this. It's like, no, please don't do this.
Hank's putting in effort to find someone, and like the first good-looking guy he finds has a ponytail, so he's disgusted. Second good-looking guy he finds has too big a nose, so he's disgusted. He eventually finds the quintessential Texan young man with a bright buckle. American
varsity
flag.
Football.
Yeah, varsity football, American flag printed like button-up shirt, big old cowboy hat, and they bond immediately. So he sets Luann up with him, and they start talking, and then Hank goes hands off and walks away, right? Meets up with Peggy, who's dancing with Bill. Talks about, you must be dancing a lot. You worked up a sweat, because she's drenched from the neck down, and she reveals that it's not her sweat down there.
One thing I want to say about Bill before we move on, because I looked at my notes again and I just remember this. So they're talking about, earlier on the episode, they're talking about Luann and how long it takes to get over a breakup and stuff like that.
Oh, and yeah, I know where you're going with this.
The conversation turns to Bill, because Bill apparently had the worst divorce in like the entire
county's
city's
ever
history.
Seen.
The county's history. And Hank goes, well, Bill turned out fine, and there's a cutaway, a very quick.
It's like we all deal with things, but you can't let other people see you cry. Bill went through the worst divorce the county's ever seen, and nobody ever sees him cry. Cutaway gag to Bill slowly closing his blinds, and you hear the loudest wailing, screaming cry, like a banshee howling.
I felt so bad, but it was so fucking. I rewound it like twice. I rewound it twice to watch the scene because it made me laugh so hard.
It's so good.
It's like that's horrible. That shouldn't be funny, but god damn it, is that really funny?
It's so good, and it's coupling that off of like 2 episodes prior with "I'm so depressed I can't even blink."
There's a lot of like depression and like sad jokes with not just with Bill, but like in general. I've noticed.
Bill also had a big depression point in the Order of the Straight Arrow, where like the wind socks that they were using were socks left by his ex-wife that he thinks she's still going to come back for.
Well, that was the thing. It's like she's like, he's like imagining she's getting like blisters whenever she's walking around, like she's not using them.
And Hank turns around like, "It's been 3 years, Dale." Or Bill.
It's been years now, Bill. Don't you think she would have bought new socks? And he's like,
he looks so sad.
But do you remember, again, this is still a tangent off that same episode. Do you remember what he says later in the episode about those fucking socks?
I'm going to want them back.
Yeah, he says he wants them back after all that. It's like, why?
Yeah.
What a freak.
Yeah. Rounding things back, Hank and Peggy have their dance, and they go off on their own, and they go home, right?
Right, they make it seem like everything's fine with Luann, this new jock dude.
Mm-hmm. They go home, and they're settling in at home, and they're talking about how successful things were. And then out the door, they see Boomhauer driving Luann home.
And then I think the few seconds later when you see the Hank scream and zoom in, that is the best animated scream I think I've ever seen.
Oh, I hope it gets better over time, but that is a powerful one.
It is so well animated that it shouldn't be that good.
Yeah. But Luann gives Boomhauer a kiss, and Hank blows his top immediately.
Oh, yeah.
He storms outside to ask what's going on, finds out that, like, Mr. Texas that Hank was so ready for had immediately started, like, feeling her up.
Yeah, trying to get into her pants and shit. And it's like, yeah, okay, definitely should not be with that guy.
And Luann, despite all of her qualities, is a decent woman.
Yeah.
And
she's not the smartest, but she's like a genuinely nice person and knows what she likes and isn't just like,
she's not ready to get abused.
Yeah, exactly.
So she calls the next trustworthy person that she knows at the bar at that time to drive her home, and it's Boomhauer. Tragically, Boomhauer is a known womanizer.
Yeah.
And they get into an argument, and she effectively invites herself into Boomhauer's home. Boomhauer is not pleased with this.
Boomhauer isn't pleased with that, but I think it really shows. I think that's a really good scene because when they show in Boomhauer's place, like Luann's sitting in like his den or his living room, and you see like all the posters and paintings around the room of like a woman in front of a car or just like tastefully nude art.
It's definitely tastefully nude and pinup.
Right, and then she turns on the light, and it's I'm colorblind, so I couldn't remember what color it was. But it's like not a normal color that the light would be on, more like a mood lighting.
Yes. And
then she's like, "Oh, things are moving really fast, and I want this," because she thinks Boomhauer's trying something with her. And
despite the fact that she's the one who put this on, he just throws blankets and a pillow on the couch and goes to bed.
And that's what I really liked about that scene is like it's not only it's a subversion, but at the same time it's like that shows a lot about his character. Where it's like he's at least a decent dude.
I think Boomhauer is in a unique position compared to his probably closest cartoon contemporary being Quagmire.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, yeah.
Boomhauer is consistently kind of a sleazy, womanizing guy, but, like, when given the chance to show interest, he is explicitly disinterested unless it is a mutual consensual exchange.
Yeah, like, he can mess around, but it's never like
it's only between consenting adults that he agrees with.
Yes, it's always something that that both people benefit from because they both want to enjoy the time. It's never some weird degenerate crazy shit like
he's
Quagmire.
never taking advantage of someone.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Did you catch the moment before they cut to the scene where Luann shows the inside of his house?
Yes.
Where Dale is talking on the front porch?
Yes. Yes, I did. Yes.
We can leave that for the viewers to enjoy as they watch along. As a couple people
Yeah,
have actually said they're watching along with us.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil any episodes or like all the jokes, but there's certain jokes that are really good that are like you just gotta kind of watch them to experience.
Yeah. So Hank's under the impression that Boomhauer is taking advantage of Luann. Boomhauer is not. Luann is remaining at Boomhauer's place for a few days. They meet in public a couple of times, and it doesn't strictly go well. There's this stupid joke at the cafeteria about ketchup and catsup. I don't remember the full details, but I remember that cracking me up in the moment.
It was mostly just like they have eight varieties of ketchup and 3 varieties of catsup, and it's just like I don't know. It was just such a weird comment that I think was supposed to be the joke in and of itself.
I think it
they
is.
had 8 ketchup and 3 catsup.
Yeah,
but no, yeah.
But it's like it's as they are finding that Boomhauer and Luann are here, Hank is doing literally everything in his power to avoid looking at them.
To completely ignore Boomhauer and Luann entirely, where Bobby is shouting at him.
Yeah, pulling on his arm, pointing at them, like, Dad, Luann and Boomhauer are here.
They're behind us, right behind you, Dad. It's like it's such a drawn out scene for so little.
And it turns into this momentary sight gag that kills me so hard. Hank walks away trying to pretend that he didn't hear to go to the fork bar. Did you catch that in the background?
Yeah, I did. The fork bar.
The fork bar. Enjoy forks from around the world. And as the menu or as the camera like zooms in to look at him, it is just an array of the most fucked up forks you've ever seen in your life.
There's so many. Like there's like a pitchfork looking one. There's ones that look like fucking weaponry from like a medieval game. It's so silly.
Not a single one has been designed to go inside the human mouth. They are all the laziest forks in the world, and I believe that was the artist just screwing around, right?
Oh, absolutely.
One thing I want to point out as I watch this episode again is that it's definitely laid out like there should be a buffet style thing, but it is pressed up against a bar, like the wall.
Yeah.
But to the left of the fork bar are 2 people standing against the wall. But there's also a cabinet and a napkin dispenser, which is framed like it should be against the wall.
Huh.
Like let me take a little screenshot of this and
yeah,
show
go
it
for
to
it,
you.
because that just again, that sounds like they were trying to get like the background art to like match or something.
Yeah.
But here, let me see this. Hang on.
Look to the left. Those guys are being flattened against the wall by that cabinet.
What the fuck?
Right?
They look like they're almost like art on the wall or something.
They're like decals of like 2 guys.
There is no room between
There's
them.
no room for their feet there.
No, what the that is a mistake for like the background artist or something. They messed up the perspective on that one real bad.
If you're listening to me, not to me. If you're listening to us do this on YouTube, I'm gonna try and remember to slide that image in the video.
It's literally just 2 people standing next to each other, but next to what looks like a small countertop.
Mm-hmm.
But the countertop is pressed up against the wall, where there's no logical, feasible way that there could be any human legs behind it.
Yeah, it's so weird. But he walks away. He tries to distract himself at the fucked up fork bar. This might be a better screenshot. But
we love the fork bar.
We love the fork bar. It's so funny how stupid they are. A lot of them look more like can openers than actual forks.
Oh my god.
Boomhauer finally talks to him, and if I recall correctly, they don't exactly come to terms quite yet.
They don't come to terms at the restaurant. No, that takes another scene.
He effectively disowns Luann.
Yeah, he basically disowns Luann, says he doesn't want anything to do with her. He's gonna take all of her stuff out of the den and box it up.
Yeah.
And like she'll have to come get it on her own.
Mm-hmm.
And the scene continues on where they're all sitting, like it's Peggy, Hank, and Bobby eating their dinner.
Yes.
But Hank notices that over at the table with Boomhauer, Luann is sobbing again like she was at the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns into this extremely poignant, like, is it Bobby or Peggy that says it, where it's like someone says that Hank says like, oh, she must have gotten dumped again, and so it's either Peggy or Hank or Peggy or Bobby that goes, yeah, you dumped her, basically.
I think
and it's like
Peggy says it, and then Bobby like says it louder.
That's what it was. Yeah, Peggy says it, and then Hank like pretends not to hear it, and then Bobby like yells it louder. That's right.
Yeah.
It's a really like it's a very
that's right.
surprisingly strong line.
Yeah, she says it quietly enough so that they can like handle it discreetly. Hank, incredulously, not deftly, says like, "What was that?" And Bobby screams it out loud.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's what it was.
At the dinner table.
Christ.
And in the next moment, Luann shows up to pick up her things. She's like crying at the door. She needs to take a breath before she opens it. She walks in to find Hank unwilling to make eye contact, watching TV, and just saying like, it's in the room. She walks into the den to find that all of her stuff is laid out again.
Like, a lot of it's been cleaned.
It's been cleaned, but it's
and
all laid out on the
organized and
tables.
stuff.
The bed's laid out.
Yeah.
It's not in boxes, and Hank comes in to say like, you know, something like you're part of the family or whatever. Like, I don't need this den for too long, I guess.
Yeah, it's really a nice ending where Hank's like, okay, she is my family, and I can't just disown her. I do care about her, because the whole episode is Peggy being like, why can't you just admit that you care about her?
Yes,
because he doesn't want to admit that he gives a shit about Luann.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really sudden ending, but I think it's still really sweet.
Yes,
because there are points where Hank is such an abrasive character, but it's nice that you get those reminders of, oh, he's not a complete dick.
Mm-hmm.
He's still just a nice guy deep down trying to do his best.
Yes. And he recognizes that family is important, and he doesn't hate Luann. I do find it entertaining that he does a couple of modifications to the den. He previously had a big, like, wooden carving of a swordfish on the wall, but Luann just put, like, a poster of, like, a hunky guy next to it, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
But when she comes back and he lets her in, the swordfish is gone, but the hunky man poster has been put up in its place. And I only realized that now, rewatching it as we're talking, realizing that hunky man looks a lot like Boomhauer. I think she has a type.
Yeah.
I know that the arrangement with Boomhauer was definitely more of a rebellion thing from her and desperate to find a place to live. But it's weird how her hunky man picture looks a lot like him.
It's a really funny gag that I at least appreciate that they thought of. But yeah, no, you'll again, knowing later in the series, she definitely has a type.
Oh yeah, definitely. This episode also ends with one of the best like ending gags.
What is it? I don't remember.
Dale, Hank, and Bill are sitting by the fence drinking beer.
Oh, that's right.
And Boomhauer's watching like a sad puppy from the middle of the street.
I think I wrote down he looked like a creepypasta character just staring at them from like a few meters away, like just unblinking.
And they're all aware of him, and they say something like, "Oh, I hate this emotional reunion stuff." Just calls out, "Boomhauer, you want a beer?" He says, "Yeah." Come on down.
Comes over.
And they come over and they crack open a beer, and I think Hank says something along the lines of, "Oh, thank God, that's over."
No, I think Bill said it's like, "Oh, that's beautiful," or something like that. Either way, it's such a good gag.
It is.
I forgot about that. Just the single image of Boomhauer staring at them from a distance away. Just standing there in the alleyway staring at them is so funny.
Like 20 feet away. He's not like at the other fence either. He's standing in the middle of the alley, in the middle of the road, with his arms by his sides like a mannequin, just watching like a dog staring through the window as the owner drives away.
Like, guys, I want a beer.
I want a beer, but I'm not about to ask him. Because Boomhauer didn't do anything wrong.
No, he didn't. He was trying to be a good guy, and everyone else just assumed he was being weird about it. I think... I don't know if I would say this is my favorite episode of all of them. I think it's definitely either the top or the second one. Just because I think it's a really funny one with a sweet message at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's in my top 2, probably.
Probably the top 2.
Yeah.
One of the two.
And that may change on the day.
I think as we obviously we're not ranking these for anything in particular.
No.
We're not going to go like, oh, at the very end we're going to rank them all. It's just like talking about it now, like as our first kind of exposure. It's like I think we're starting to get a litmus test of like what our types of episodes are going to be like.
Yeah.
Where we're like, oh, I like this type of episode and don't care about this type of episode.
Yes. And so far, it seems to be, it's good until there's a celebrity.
Until there's Willie Nelson butting his way in.
Fine dude outside of the show, but inside the show, he makes for a bland episode.
Makes for a very, very uninteresting episode.
And speaking of interesting episodes, episode 6. Hank's unmentionable problem.
I didn't expect this type of episode to crop its head this early.
Yeah, I'm much the same way. This feels like something that would show up in like a season 2.
Not that it's a bad episode. I think it's still a very funny episode. But man, this is one hell of a concept of an episode where it
reveals a lot about all the characters.
But even so, even in just the shortest sort of description of like the overall plot is just the episode of Hank can't take a shit.
Yep. That's the plot of the episode. Hank has constipation and both can't and won't do anything about it until things are dire.
And it is so intensely fascinating how far they run with this gag and how well it works. Because it shouldn't be funny. It shouldn't be as interesting as it is.
But it's so good. The whole episode synopsis can be summed up with Hank can't take a shit. Everyone's worried about him. He spends half the episode willfully not doing anything about it because he's too embarrassed to consider it a problem. And then he goes to the doctor and finds out that it can be, and then finally tries to take care of himself. And everyone's supportive, but it's still deeply embarrassing. Spoiler alert, eventually he takes a shit.
Well, yeah, like the last 30 seconds of the episode it ends with fucking the Peggle music as he
does. And it's one of the better animated moments in the show so far because we get like this sweeping motion around him as he steps out like he's ascended to godhood when really he's just taking a poop after not being able to for about 6 days.
It is an episode that they've run so far with the concept that you're like, I can't help but applaud them and at least appreciate that they've come up with enough content and jokes to make this episode work.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole concept just feeling like it should have been the starting gag of an episode.
Yes.
But it just keeps going and it somehow just works.
It does. It plays a lot off of Hank's personal sense of shame that we saw in the episode with the sex ed. It talks about his personal pride and being seen as someone who is functionally unstoppable. Not even just for Bobby, but for everyone. Even though everyone else is comfortable with talking about it and worried about him, he just refuses to let anyone understand that he even has a butthole, let alone that it's clogged.
Well, I mean, it is an embarrassing thing. You don't want to tell someone, "Hey, I can't shit," but at the same time, it's like, it's your
as
your
I
family.
come into my 30s soon, I'm definitely more willing to say "Hey, I'm a little backed up."
Yeah, I get it. No, I'm the same way. But I'm just saying, I can understand why someone would feel embarrassed about that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
About just being it's something you don't want to necessarily say
especially in Texas, especially in the late 90s. Standards were different.
There's just a lot of factors, a lot of different factors why you couldn't get that going on. But
all of his friends were giving him advice. Even early on, Boomhauer drives past the boys having a drink in the alley. And the girl that he's been seeing in his car speaks through the window giving him advice. Hank just leans in "Have we met?" "No, sir, we have not." And then they drive away.
They just drive off. They just drive off.
It's also weird how almost Lynchian this episode is in how many weird circumstantial things happen to Hank that will set him off relating to this thing. Peggy is idly watching a TV show in which a stuffy medical guy is talking about his constipation.
Yeah.
Or talking about constipation in general and the dangers. He changes the channel. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I think that wasn't. I think Peggy was watching that intentionally. I would assume.
I would assume so, but it's just like a scheduled show on TV.
Yeah.
She's not watching a tape. That's just on while Hank is suffering from this problem.
Fair point. Okay, I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I guess I thought of it with like the modern standards if she just like pulled something up on her smart TV, but obviously this is the 90s.
That's satellite TV, baby. That was just happening, and she was like, "Oh, I guess this is relevant." And then he changes the channel because he refuses to acknowledge it. And Dale's wife, who is a weather girl, Nancy, was gossiping with Peggy earlier about it, and then that is the moment that she decides that she's going to tell everyone on the news station and everyone listening to the weather about his constipation, and he's furious.
I wrote my notes like, why the fuck did Nancy say that on TV? Mm-hmm. Why? In what world would you announce to the world that your friend, close friend in many ways, that they can't shit?
Yeah,
like that is not something you say on like TV, regardless of if it's local or national, in any feasible way.
Yeah,
and again. I say then again earlier when she finds out about it from Peggy, they're gossiping. She does say that she thinks Hank might have polio. So
yes,
this is Nancy we're talking about.
Yes, that was before that she said it on TV. Like I'm not a doctor, but I'm a meteorologist, and I think he's got polio. Peggy seems intelligent enough to understand it's probably not polio, but it's not 100%.
Right. It's just. This is an episode, like you said, where a lot of character traits get revealed very quickly.
Yes.
Because everyone's just so fucking weird in this episode.
Yes.
In a good way. In
an effort to give Hank advice, I think Bill or Dale suggests that he drink bacon grease and just kind of lube up the system.
Oh my God.
Which Hank is disgusted by, despite the fact that we see him 3 episodes earlier making himself a sandwich in which he contemplates putting mayonnaise on it, but instead he decides to use the bacon grease that he just made for his sandwich as a spread instead. So he's not...
Oh my fucking God. Is that what that was?
Yeah. He's not disgusted by the bacon grease. He's disgusted by the idea that it should lube him up.
I wrote that down in my notes at some point. I was like, what is that gray shit in the can that he puts on?
That's bacon grease.
I didn't realize it at first. Now that you said it, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I was like, what the fuck is the gray shit in the can he's putting on his sandwich? That makes more sense now.
Yeah. No,
I was just like, what is this like gruel he's putting on there?
So like, for anyone who may not know, it's a bad thing to pour bacon grease down the sink. So in a lot of households, particularly in the south of America, you just kind of pour it into a can and throw it out.
Yeah.
And that seems to be his standard. It's what I was growing up on. But he just digs into it and slathers it on a sandwich. But like,
I don't know why my brain didn't connect that. I just saw this can of gray slop and I just didn't put 2 and 2 together.
That's bacon grease, baby. He's
bacon grease,
up his
baby.
sandwich. But again, like in this episode, he's recommended to do that, and he seems appalled despite the fact that he will do it. And I think it's either like he's appalled by the idea that it would help his digestion, or he doesn't want other people to know that he does this.
Right.
He also gets recommended to ride on his riding lawnmower for a while, which after the weather segment incident, he does like at 9 p.m.
He does try.
Peggy attempts to like trick him with laxative laced ice cream.
Did you see? And
then when Hank learns through Bobby, he gets up and walks away, and Bobby just starts digging into the giant bowl of laxative ice cream.
He eats like the whole thing off
and
screen.
We don't hear about that again.
We do not hear. I was gonna say before we get further in that, because I wrote that down too. Do you remember when Peggy has like the nightmare?
Yes. Okay. So I have this playing as we're talking, and I just paused on that scene because it's the funniest thing in the whole episode.
Did you see Cotton
Hill hanging off the casket like a dang.
So everyone like all the main male characters are like the pallbearers. Like you see Dale and Bill and Boomhauer lifting the coffin and moving it, and then you see behind, I forget who it is, I forget which one it is, but in the back is Cotton. He's one of the pallbearers, but they changed the angle. Yeah, they changed the angle, so he's holding it, but he's basically dangling from it while the other 5 men are carrying the coffin.
It's so funny.
It's so fucking funny.
And then they get to the grave and they have a talk over the body, and Hank's in like the ugliest clown makeup.
Yep.
Because they overdid it. And then there's more dream-related nonsense, but She wakes
your
up
math
from
homework.
that. Yeah. She wakes up and scares him while he's on the pot in the middle of the night. And this
Something
is where
I noticed.
What?
I was say about that scene where she gets up and checks on him in the bathroom in like the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a couple of animation errors in that scene.
There are, yeah.
I noticed it while he was in there. He raises his arm and his watch is still on, like in the middle of the night. But then the scene after, there's another scene like immediately after where it cuts and his arm lifts up again and then the watch is gone completely.
Oh no, it's the other way around. She walks in on him and he's clearly not wearing a watch, but she comes in to hug him and he has the watch on.
Okay. I didn't know if he had the watch on first or not.
No.
Because I immediately noticed that the watch was on.
Sorry, I'm watching this as we're talking it, and then the next scene it pans to Peggy and then pans back to both of them, and the watch is gone again.
Yeah, the watch keeps disappearing. Mm-hmm. I noticed that immediately. I don't know why my brain locked onto that in that scene, but I kept noticing the watch was disappearing and reappearing.
It's
what a
weird time.
It's so inconsequential. It's like I'm I'm not like saying it's a bad thing. It was just one of those things I immediately lasered onto when I saw it.
Yeah, no, it's there. So she effectively gets Hank to agree to, take it more seriously.
Go to a doctor,
and she enters into like maximum overdrive in trying to take care of him. She does everything in her power to try and get him to poop, quite frankly. And this causes a lot of both emotional turmoil as Hank is losing his sense of pride, but also mental anguish as he's being effectively controlled and is having to gauge the importance of having a colon versus living the life that he wants to live. And a lot of that means just eating as much meat as he wants.
Yeah.
Because...
And it's just like there's so many moments in this episode where it's just like Hank being a prideful dude just constantly keeps being a problem, and he won't acknowledge it, and it's just getting worse and worse to the point where when he's at the doctor, the threat literally becomes, if you don't shit, we're gonna have to remove your colon.
And that is the final time in which he decides that he needs to take action, and he's still not 100% convinced that it isn't worth it.
Yeah, he considers just losing his fucking colon. Before we move on from that scene, though, two things. Yeah. One, why the fuck did they have that scene with his old like teacher?
Oh yeah.
His was it elementary
school?
This is
an old person doctor.
Yeah, it's like this old lady comes out and she's like, "Oh, I used to be Hank's teacher. This is an old person doctor. What are you here for?" It's like this whole episode is just to humiliate Hank.
Yeah,
it felt so bad.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to mention. Do you remember the elevator scene with Bobby?
I sure do.
Of course you do, because I didn't think they were gonna go there. I really didn't, because I saw what they were setting up. They did so. For context, Bobby is like walking around the hospital trying to find stuff to do because because Hank doesn't want him in there while he's getting his procedure done, and Bobby is fucking around in the elevator. He's hitting all the buttons as he gets off,
and as he gets off, someone very important gets on.
Two people and a doctor. A lady very heavily pregnant in a wheelchair with her husband, and the doctor rushing into the elevator. As the elevator is now going up, every individual
one floor at a time,
one floor at a time,
because he hits every button.
The scene lingers as the elevator doors close, and you see the lights for the floors go off one by one. And I think it's like the second or third one, you hear this baby cry.
You hear a baby cry and a splash of water.
I didn't think they were going to go there. I thought they were going to cut... I swear to God, I thought they were going to cut it off with the implication.
Last time we recorded, we talked about how, like, we knew that they went a little bit further than a lot of shows like this normally do. I didn't expect it to happen so soon.
Exactly. I genuinely did not expect, like, that kind of a joke that soon into the show.
So funny.
It's so good because, again, it's the show doesn't linger on it. It just moves on really fast.
It just happens, and that's just part of Arlen life now.
That's just how Arlen be.
Mm-hmm. So, like, Hank is having his issue escalated to the point where they have to do a colonoscopy. they have to shove a camera up in there, and they're wiggling around. Bobby arrives at some point here because he's bored, and watching the inside of Hank's butt is funny, right? So Hank's just sitting there, and they're slowly tunneling through his innards to find out what the blockage is. At one point, taking a 5-minute break, and they're all stretching in the room around Hank, who's laying there with a camera stuck what probably feels like several miles up his butt.
The fucking, like, them doing, like, calisthenics while they're trying to check out his ass.
Yeah, and this is the point where they, like, determine, after plumbing the depths, like, we don't know what the problem is. The next best thing we can do is surgery, and that involves removing your colon. And this is where, like, the final countdown begins for Hank, because he has a week before his surgery date. And so there becomes this kind of miserable, like, soft montage of him doing everything he hates, like lowering all of his standards so that he could potentially try and have a colon long enough to enjoy it with his family. That means going to a vegan market with a very interesting man.
Yeah, the vegan dude is just... Is there anything that tastes good? No.
No. They have tofu, and they have non-soy tofu. Luann shows up with a flyer for an acupuncturist.
Yeah.
And Hank eventually tries that. Not immediately, but he certainly tries. He does threaten that, like, if anyone sticks a needle like that in me, I'll kick his ass. But he does go there of his own accord and does get stuck with needles, and then gets up with the needles in him and goes and kicks the acupuncturist in the ass. But, like, he has this montage after this where, in the same way that you would see a kid who has summer school looking out the window and seeing all of his friends playing around and feeling miserable about it, but it's Hank on the toilet, unable to go out and enjoy hanging out with the boys because he's trying to poop. And that's the thing that he can't do. And you know, they all support him. They go to a restaurant so that he can have company while he eats salad while everyone else is eating ribs.
And there's a moment where he goes to the bathroom suddenly, but the men's bathroom is like locked because it's like a private bathroom type thing.
Yeah. And
so Peggy has him go into the women's restroom, and so everyone's just like waiting and watching and hoping he goes.
And he comes back and he's like, nothing.
And everyone's just all dejected and sad because they were hoping and waiting and praying.
He's looking around the bathroom. He's like seeing himself in the flowery decorated mirror, seeing the potpourri. His eye lingers a little bit too long on the tampons dispenser, to the point that he's like slapping the toilet roll because he just needs any stimulation.
He needs anything that's going to just take his mind off of what he's stuck doing.
And he comes back. Everyone's talking about how they want to support him, but he just can't do it. And it's this somber moment for like a guy who can't poop.
Yeah.
And
so
then there's...
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to move on to like the next scene if you had anything else you want to say about that scene. I was like, because it eventually just comes back to them going back home.
Yep.
And like... He's still trying, but he's all dejected. It's not working. And there's a point where
there's
Peggy,
the secondary montage where like the boys are trying to drill a hole outside. He's watching a squirrel climbing the tree.
Yeah.
And he gives up on pooping. He gets up and like his glasses splash into the toilet, and Peggy comes running.
And she's excited, like, oh, did it happen? Did it happen?
No, Peggy, I just dropped my glasses.
And there's this moment where like Peggy sort of has like a heart-to-heart with him, where it's like, I forget what exactly she says or what she like resolves to do, but it's basically like, I'm sorry I've been so overbearing, and I'm sorry, like I didn't let you figure this out on your own type thing.
She's apologizing for not letting him like live the life that he wanted to on his own terms. Like,
that's what it was.
I'm sorry I'm getting in the way of you living your life. And it's like the last day before the colon, removal.
Yeah.
And it's getting
really
like
touching. The last moment he has.
And they're talking about it in the same way that you talk about like giving a dog a last meal before putting it down. That's right. The heaviness of the moment. And they're like, she is crying and holding on to him, and he's talking about like how he'll be okay without a colon. They're both crying. They both shed a tear.
Yeah, they're both getting really sad, and
then Hank's
there's
just like, I gotta go. He's like, no, Hank, I don't want to let go of you. And he's like, no, Peggy, I got to go. And he pushes her off.
This is like the last 30 seconds. There's not that much time to really dwell on what happens, but Hank runs in there.
He runs into the bathroom. He shoves Bobby out, who's mid-toothbrushing.
Yeah.
There's a moment where the camera lingers on Bobby for a moment, like slack-jawed, mouth agape, hearing like toilet sounds as like the toothpaste is dripping off of his chin.
Yeah.
And then you hear the sound of like a splash in the toilet flush. Luann does an arm pump. Another animation error happens as it pans to Bobby in a completely different outfit with a clean face, by the way.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. And then like Hank walks out to this triumphant music. There's like a beautiful panning shot, very well animated. Peggy throws her arms around him. He doesn't say anything, and then cut to credits.
Yeah, the episode just ends. It's so sudden, but it's a perfect ending. 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. And then there's go ahead.
I couldn't believe, I wrote it in my notes at the end, like, I can't believe they made an entire episode about Hank not being able to shit. And then they just end it like that.
Yeah. And then they had the perfect mid-credits like scene.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Hank is riding his lawnmower, and he's just, I'm an actor, and I decide that I'm going to do nudity when I need to.
When it serves the story.
When it serves the story, and I decided that showing you my rear end was as much as you need. Well, let it be known that the big wigs in Fox wanted a lot more.
And if my body offended you, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night. He rides off, credits end.
It's so funny. Such a good episode.
So funny. And that is our 6th episode.
I think this has been a really good like primer for the rest of the series.
Yes.
Because I always worry when I start like a new show or any sort of show that's been like off the air for a while, and you go back to like the first couple episodes, it's like they're still finding their footing usually.
Yes.
So you can never tell how high the quality is going to be that early on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just based on what we've got here, I think it's really, really good so far.
It's so funny. It's so strong. There have been maybe 1.5 dud episodes, and they aren't bad. They're just not that interesting.
Right.
And it's so good. But all of the long-standing jokes, all of them that I'm aware of, were set up in the first season, within the first 3 episodes.
Even the episodes that aren't very interesting, they still have good moments and good jokes that like carry them through. It's not like you're gonna get a moment of like, well, I just don't want to watch this anymore. I'm so dreadfully bored. There's still things that keep it entertaining.
Yeah.
It's just there's not always the highest of like gut-busting jokes.
Every episode has been a joy to watch. The only thing is like some of them have not been a joy to watch twice. Right?
Exactly.
I'm having a great time doing this. I'm so glad that you agreed to my short notice request to do this podcast with me.
No, I'm having a great time. This has been
so
really
good.
fun episodes to watch so far.
I've been kind of like watching 1 episode a night, 1 to 2 episodes a night for like a little nightcap for a little bit here, and it's been a very fun thing to like be wrapping up for bed and like thinking like, oh, I get to enjoy a little bit of King of the Hill tonight. That's been great.
Well, it's like watching a little bit of it like this has been. It's reminding me how cozy this show is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's not so much that you have to like give it all of your attention, but it's enough where it's like, it's just nice to watch. There's nothing you really have to get like too crazy invested in. There's nothing that's gonna like distract you or really take you off guard. It's just a good show with constantly good writing and jokes.
Yeah. And they set up a lot of things ahead of time that they don't need to. I don't know if you saw, but like at the start of Hank's Unmentionable Problem, episode 6, you see Peggy playing Boggle, which continues to be a recurring character trait for her further down the road.
Oh no! Believe me. In my notes, the first note I wrote was, "Oh, good, Boggle."
Yeah, it's coming. Peggy the Boggle Champ is episode 9 of this season.
Oh God, Boggle cometh.
Boggle Rising.
Boggle Rising.
I did want to say that it is very funny that Lady Bird makes an appearance in episode 1, and that is it?
She shows up in 6. It's very brief, but she shows up in 6.
Okay. Further
It's just like a
cementing her
background
position
thing.
as a cryptid that only shows up where she is explicitly relevant.
She's just kind of in the scene for a few seconds and then disappears. I don't remember what scene she's in,
Yeah.
but I did write down in my notes that she was in the scene.
Her existence in the world is cemented in episode 4 by Bobby flicking dog poo with his his 9-iron, but like
she is physical in that moment.
she is not a photogenic dog and thus does not appear on camera very often. But it's I've been keeping my eye out for her. I guess I missed her that one time, but I've been keeping my eye out for our
It's like
gal Lady
playing
Bird.
Where's Waldo. It's like playing Where's Waldo. You gotta find Lady Bird.
She shows up so rarely, it honestly kind of is.
Yeah.
But like I feel like everything that I was looking for has been found in these first 6 episodes. I am so excited to keep going. I had a great time. This is a good show.
They've established so much groundwork in such short time that it's like, well, now they don't have to do that much work to establish like character traits or running jokes anymore. They can just do the show, and that makes me more excited to see what they come up with.
I think I said the opposite when we did our last podcast episode, but I am now like actually excited to see more of Bill, if only because every time he's on screen, it's the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, no, I because that's the thing is I remember characters like Bill being really sad in some episodes. So I'm like, I was afraid that it was gonna be really overbearing, but I mean,
it is,
as long as they keep it as they've been so far and don't go too overboard with it, I think it'll be fine.
Hey, remember the last episode when you mentioned seeing an episode that was synopsized by like Bill gets depressed over Christmas reminding him of a former breakup and decides to kill himself?
Yes.
So I'm sure we'll be having our dark moments, but right now,
we'll have our
funny.
moments, but we can keep the Bill sobbing in his house bit for a little bit.
Yes. Being so depressed he can't even blink.
Do we have anything else we want to say, or should we just call it from here? We've been going for a while.
We've been going for about 2.5 hours. I think that's it. We have 6 more episodes. Do you want to do another 6er, or do you want to split it up into like 3 and 3?
How do you feel? I'm fine either way.
I could do either way. I had the schedule to be able to do 6 in 1 week.
How about you let me know how it feels to edit this 6-episode one down?
Fair. That's fair. That's fair.
And then we'll see how you feel if we want to just split it up into 3s or how we go from there.
Yeah, we'll see
how the load feels when you're working on it.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. But yeah, I don't have anything else in mind. I'm just having a blast, and I'm really excited to see more.
Me too. I think that's a perfect way to end it, of just being like, you know what? I am having a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing more over the hill.
Yeah, and I hope everyone listening is going to have fun with it as well. As I said earlier, it seems like a couple folks are thinking of watching along with us. So if anyone has anything that they would like to share, anything we didn't comment on, you know where to find us.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those that don't know who we are, I'm Leshii.
I'm Guard.
And I'll make sure that the next time I upload, I put places to find us in the description. I think I actually did last time, but I definitely...
You probably did. I think you did.
I think I did. But I'll do it again. You can't stop me. I'll do it again. I'll fucking do it.
You will find us.
You will find us. And you will watch King of the Hill with us. 6 episodes at a time. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to stop recording. Bye.
Okay. I am recording, but we haven't synced, obviously.
I am recording too. We're going to sync.
Do you want to do the clap again, or do you want to do something else?
We should probably do something that both of us can hear. What if we just say 1, 2, 3, sync?
That works.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start here. 1, 2,
1,
3,
2,
sync.
3, sync. It's fine. We both say the word sync, and that's when it starts.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'll figure it out later.
It's fine. It'll be fine.
Okay.